Please welcome to the stage Director of the Polish Institute of International Affairs, Jarosław Ćwiek-Karpowicz.
Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Polish Institute of International Affairs 2026 Strategic Ark. It is both my privilege and responsibility to once again open this very important conference. This year, we are focusing on a very substantial and serious subject, preparing for wars to come. We meet in Warsaw, where the past is not a distant memory. It is present in the city's streets, architecture, institutions, and in the memory of its people. A month ago, we commemorated the anniversary of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising 1943, and quite soon in August, another anniversary of the Warsaw Uprising 1944. I'm personally devoted to both events, as my grandfather participated in the preparation of the Warsaw Uprising, especially after the death of his brother-in-law, who had been just released from Auschwitz. All these things remind us that peace is not a given condition of international politics and life. It is something that must be built, protected, and restored at immense cost. This reality frames our task for the next 2 days. We are here because we understand that failing to prepare for conflict does not prevent it. I would say the opposite. Unpreparedness invites risk of miscalculation and instability. The strategic environment which the community of democracies faces today is more complex than at any point in recent decades. Lines between war and peace are increasingly blurred. Conflicts no longer begin with formal declarations. They start quickly with a cyber attack on critical energy infrastructure, like in the Baltic Sea, with the manipulation of information ecosystems or economic coercion. Russia is in its 4th year of war against Ukraine while preparing for a war to come against the West. PISM experts recently noted that within 3 to 5 years, it will have credible capabilities to conduct offensive operations against one or more European countries in our region. Since 2022, Russia has sharply increased military expenditures, spending roughly $190 billion on defense last year, making it the world's 3rd largest military spender behind the US and China. Russia continues to threaten parts of our region and is ready to sustain warfare by conducting missile and cyber campaigns, all to test our cohesion and collective will. This leads me to say that if our adversaries are adapting, then we must adapt faster. Preparation must be comprehensive. Military capability remains essential, but it is no longer sufficient on its own. Societal resilience has become a core component of national security. The ability of a population to absorb shocks, to maintain solidarity, and to resist manipulation is as important as the strength of armed forces. It was very clear for Polish students, among them my father, who protested here in Warsaw in March 1968 against communist oppression and Soviet domination. This, in my opinion, raises today difficult but necessary questions. Are our political systems prepared to act decisively? Are our economies structured to withstand sustained disruption? Are our critical infrastructures well protected? And perhaps most important, are our societies mentally prepared for the possibility of prolonged crisis? These are not purely technical questions. They are deeply political, requiring trade-offs, prioritization, and, at times, tough conversation with the public. Policy, strategy, and technology are all critical, but finally decisions are made by people. under pressure, with incomplete information, often with limited time. Investing in human capital, in expertise, in judgment, in leadership is therefore fundamental. We need institutions that can attract and retain talent, think long-term, and operate effectively across disciplines. This is precisely why Strategic Ark matters. Over the next 2 days, we will examine scenarios, make and test assumptions, and debate policy options. Our panelists bring together perspectives from government, academia, industry, and civil society. This diversity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. I encourage you all to approach these discussions with a spirit of openness. Question what seems obvious. Revisit what has long been taken for granted. Be willing to engage with different views. And above all, focus on practical outcomes, on what can be implemented or improved. Ladies and gentlemen, the future we're preparing for is not clear, but is manageable if we approach it with seriousness, cooperation, and a commitment to learning. Preparation is also about responsibility. It is about that if crises come, we are ready. It is about strengthening the foundation of stability so that conflict becomes less likely. And it is about preserving, as best as we can, conditions for peace. I wish you a great discussion, great time, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Now, let's move straight into our first session. This will be a one-on-one conversation on economic resilience. Today, we talk a lot about security, and rightly so. But security does not end with military capabilities and hardware. It also involves public finances, supply chains, industrial capacity, critical infrastructure, and the state's ability to function under pressure. These are all fundamentally economic issues. Today, the economy is no longer just a driver of well-being. It is, to put it bluntly, a matter of survival. That is exactly why we want to kick off this year's Strategic Ark with our first conversation titled State Economic Resilience in Times of Crisis.
And I think that this is also why this topic works so well as our opening conversation, because resilience sounds like a big strategic word, but in practice it comes down to very concrete things. Namely, can the state pay for what it needs to pay for? Can companies keep operating? Can supply chains hold? Can critical infrastructure be protected? And can decisions be taken quickly when things start to go wrong? Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our panelist. Andrzej Domański, Minister of Finance and Economy of Poland.
The conversation will be moderated by Antoni Kim, editor of the Index of Economic Freedom at the Heritage Foundation.
And this session will run without Q&A. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, PISM. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anthony Kim. I'm a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. I'm a big fan of Poland. And also, I like to visit these trillion-dollar economy. I smelled, yeah? And especially Poland, it's a fresh and growing even more. So I'm very, once again, excited to be here with you all this afternoon, but especially with our Excellency, Mr. Finance Minister. I know you had a very busy schedule this morning, so thanks for joining us for this conversation. We're gonna have about 20 minutes or so conversation, but Mr. Minister, I have to ask you, I got to know you're a seasoned and experienced chess player. You had a good match last week, I was told, and this conversation will not be anything like an intellectual chess game, so it'll be a very easy conversation. You and I, obviously, we have known each other, but not in person, so great to meet you. We don't have any scripted conversation, but this will be a very organic way. When I think about chess, it's really about strategy, resilience, and fighting spirit, fighting skill when you try to move things here and there. In that kind of context, do you think that the Polish economy, as you are in charge of driving many things, Do you think this wonderful economy has strategy, resilience, and fighting spirit? Maybe that's the opening question for our conversation.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's really great to be here. And yes, you're right. Last week I had a chance to play against Judith Polgar, the best woman player ever. And you are right. There is something in common between that chess has with economy, because sometimes it doesn't really matter how many figures or pawns you have, but it's rather how well they are placed on the chessboard and whether you can use them efficiently. And yes, Poland has strategy, but even more, Poland has ambitions. And the fact that during last 36 years, we had no recession in Poland, apart from COVID, but in general, our economy was constantly growing. During this period, there was only one country in the world wide that has higher pace of growth than Poland, and it was China. But the fact that we managed to achieve this success is because Polish people are really, really ambitious. And sometimes I also say that one of the reasons of our success is that Polish people are never happy. Really always want more, and to achieve more. So we are right now among the biggest economies in the world. We are the 6th biggest economy in the European Union, the fastest growing, large European economy, but we want more. And right now, Polish people have ambitions also to have more influence on how Europe is looking like, where the world is heading. This is why, thanks to the invitation from US, we are so proud that we are also participating in G20 group works. And we believe that there is still a lot for our economy, for our country to be achieved.
Absolutely. I think this is why I wanted to start with these 3 keywords, if I may, which are directly related to your chess skill: strategy, resilience, and fighting spirit. I think all of these, Polish people are ready to do more and equipped. And let's try to zoom in our conversation a bit more micro level. You know Washington very well. Of course, you know numbers very well too, private sector, your previous experience, Mr. Finance Minister. Nowadays, if we look at this whole geoeconomic landscape, it's like economic security is energy security, and energy security is national security. All these critical security dimensions are interlinked more than ever. But as an economist, I happen to believe economic security, economic resilience is really the core of the whole triangle. Could you comment for our audience the status of the Polish economy as you see? I mean, obviously, you kind of talked about briefly the resilience of the Polish economy, the great journey, but where are we as of today?
Right. So, as you mentioned, Polish economy is really resilient. And why is it so? Because I strongly believe of the Polish diversification. That's it would be really hard for any of us here to name one sector or one company that is the most important for our country. We have strong internal market. At the same time, Poland is really well integrated into global value chains. We take profits from being member of the European Union, and we are proud member of EU. At the same time, because of the strong institutions set at the beginning of 90s, also our internal market is really, really strong.
A big market too.
Yes, market of the 37 millions of consumers. Having said that, my job right now is not to be proud of the success that has been achieved. My job now is to focus on what are the next steps, what we need to do to secure the prospect, the growth of my country. So, of course, I can be proud of the strengths, but I'd rather like to focus on weaknesses. Because, let's be honest here, we still have a couple of things that we need to fix. For example, energy mix. right now still 50% of our energy mix is based on coal. We definitely need to lower that down, and this is why right now Poland is investing billions of zloty or euros in onshore, offshore, grid, storage, and of course also nuclear, together with our US partners. So this is one of the fields, areas where I think that there is lots of low-hanging fruits for Polish economy. Another one is the structure of the capital. As we have right now, Poland, I believe that only Cyprus has higher share of household savings that are kept in cash or bank deposits, higher than Poland. So we try to convince people, we try to encourage people to invest their home assets, invest their savings more efficiently. And by changing the structure, we can not only provide better returns for households, what's the most important, but also provide capital for Polish companies, for Warsaw Stock Exchange. We already implemented some instruments for private equity, venture capital investments, as we are still below the EU average, not to mention strong US capital markets. So I focus on those two, energy transition and building strong capital markets, as I believe they can be also the new engines of Polish GDP growth.
If I may, Mr. Finance, 100% energy, especially US-Poland energy cooperation, fantastic. And also more dynamic banking and finance sector in Poland will be plus. And if I may, just quickly, you mentioned very important keywords: secure, protect, peace and prosperity for the Polish people. That's the kind of key thing. But you got to defend. You got to have a defense mechanism for the Polish economy. I'm talking about real hardcore defense. It's one thing that we talk about, defense spending must be beyond certain level percentage of GDP, and Poland has been doing fantastic. But without growing economy, without dynamic economy, you cannot really buy, purchase, invest in, defense equipment. And it's good to note that the United States and Poland, very good bilateral cooperation on defense side. And also there's, you probably know better, at the European level, SAFE program. If I may, just quickly, do you think the SAFE program is really safe?
Yes, SAFE program is really safe, and you can trust me. There's no better...
I trust you. I want audience trust you.
There's no better, no more efficient way to secure funding for our development of our army than SAFE program. Right now, the SAFE loan is around 3.2, maybe 3.4%. Well, I wouldn't be able to get such an interest rate on the market as a Minister of Finance, not to mention Polish Development Bank, which actually is right now borrowing on the market to fund spending of our national fund. So we are spending, as you may know, 5% of our GDP, 200 billion zloty a year on defense, not because we love to, but we do believe it's really necessity. That's our historical obligation. And we see that the risk from the East is serious. For sure, you're going to have lots of discussion about it later today, but definitely we just cannot save, we just need to keep security as our top priority. At the same time, it's important to say, as a Minister of Finance, of course, the word efficiency is always crucial for me. So I want each zloty to be spent as effectively as possible. And of course, I want strong Polish defense industry because of many reasons. First of all, this will be one of the engines of our economy growth. Then, because of some security reasons, it's really good to have the production at home. At the same time, it's important to have good cooperation with our strong allies like US. We'd like to have lots of transfer of knowledge, transfer of IPs. We are probably one of the biggest buyer of US military equipment right now. And I will not tell you a secret that we also have a special loan with US, which is in many aspects similar to safe mechanism.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, I think that our audience will see and understand better. I mean, obviously, when it comes down to defense, the more the better, the stronger the better, the more efficient the better. So I see you as a finance minister. You're not like an army general, but you're like a Navy SEAL Delta Force behind the scene, making sure things are working out fiscally. Because without fiscal responsibility within the boundary and efficiency, how can you achieve real, meaningful defense capacity and mechanism? If I may, just quickly switching our gear, given our time limitation, I'm really, like I said, Poland is a very, 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 very important country in the region and around the world, obviously. And if I may, this is a genuine expression. I think we are going through the Polish moment here. I mean, really, and the more to come, basically, right? And I'm so glad that coming from Washington, D.C., I'm happy to report back to you, it's a genuine, in Washington, U.S.-Poland relationship is really healthy and really even more growing. This is not left, right, Democrat, Republican issue. Everybody loves Poland, right? And you've been to Washington many times. You've been to North Carolina, as I understand. And maybe later this year, you may have to come to Florida for G20. What's your view on that? I mean, you basically have a really very exciting opportunity ahead of you. In my view, as a person who does geopolitics and geoeconomics, this December G20 meeting will be a really important occasion. How do you see it from Polish Navy SEAL perspective?
Well, I think you are too kind. Really great to hear that. And yes, you are right. We achieved as a country a lot. Right now, Poland is, as mentioned by everyone, as a huge success. I don't know whether you know, but it was 1980. Yes, when Lech Wałęsa said that one day Poland will be next Japan. It was dark days of communism. Mm-hmm. So people were thinking that this is that he's not serious. Mm-hmm. That this is maybe even a little bit, let me say, insane, in the 80s. And last year, Poland overtook Japan in GDP per capita adjusted for purchasing power prices. Mm-hmm. So this is really great achievement. But we need to use this moment. We need to use our participation in G20 group to achieve even more. And I will participate in this ministerial level meetings, like this April in
Washington.
In Washington. The next one is end of August.
Yeah.
As I also have trade in my portfolio, there will be another one in July. So the agenda is pretty packed. And well, I have also ambition to represent or to use our voice in G20 to represent the Central Eastern Europe perspective, which I believe is not present in G20 so far.
By the way, in that context, I must confess, I share your healthy skepticism of Poland joining Eurozone. I think that's something that probably takes some more thinking and sorting out. But anyways, that's not the part of the conversation I wanted to get into. I want to challenge you on this. I mean, everything seems to be really exciting and good and really getting more ambitious, all that. But when it comes down to immediate economic reality, it's not an easy equation. We have a multiple conflicts going on, especially at the energy dimension. It's very challenging. You have this, unfortunate ongoing prolonged war in Ukraine, in your neighbor. Middle East and all that. I mean, PISM's conference this week is very timely. President Trump will visit Beijing. How do you see, these external factors coming to Poland? I mean, again, energy price, prolonged uncertainty even. How do you navigate this as a finance minister?
Uncertainty in the markets is never helping. That's clear. The oil price going up, Brent above $100 per barrel. That's a challenge for public finances everywhere. That being said, it's interesting because Poland was really preparing for such a day, not for a year, but for many, many, I would say, decades, as we were always preparing for one day when Russia will decide to cut us off from oil and their gas. So this is why actually all governments were investing heavily in our infrastructure. I believe we have really good infrastructure to import natural gas, to import oil, and actually we have also right now ambitions to be a natural gas hub for the whole Central Eastern Europe. That's what I believe is absolutely doable. And of course, we're talking about the geopolitical conflicts. Of course, what's happening right now in Middle East is not helping. We see some banks cutting their forecasts for our GDP growth, hiking or raising forecasts for inflation. Also, the yields of our bonds are going up.
Sure, yeah.
So this situation is not helping. But as you said, Polish economy is really resilient, and I'm absolutely convinced that we'll manage to go through this challenging times.
Indeed. Less than 1 minute, my final question, very quickly. Again, you visited United States many times, Washington, you know the temperature of Washington, the wind, where it flows, you know that. Again, US-Poland partnership relationship, we never expected it would be pretty always 45-degree linear line up and down. But at least from my perspective, as I said, I think we are really getting better and greater. What do you say for our audience, Mr. Minister?
US is our strongest ally. That's clear. Poland is also a good ally. As I said, we are spending 5% of our GDP buying lots of military equipment, also from US. Right now, we are building the first Polish nuclear power plant together with US companies. Of course, sometimes we'd like to have these relations more balanced. I'd like more Polish companies to enter US markets. Quite recently, I met Howard Lutnick. I told him that I would love to have more Polish companies present there. We had good discussion. We definitely like to develop our relations. We have many strong US companies being present here. So far I see no big challenges for our cooperation.
This is an ongoing journey together, obviously. So, Mr. Minister, I want to say that you have an open invitation from the Heritage Foundation. Love to continue this conversation in Washington, D.C. And ladies and gentlemen, in this rainy afternoon, Minister Domansky and I, we hope we didn't torture you, but we somehow entertain you with some challenges and greater interest. So please join me thanking for his wonderful time with us. Mr. Finance Minister, thank you so very much for your time.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Minister. You can now please rejoin our audience. Anthony, could you please come over here for a quick recap? And please bring your mic with you.
This is a total surprise.
So, Anthony, today the governments are expected to spend more on defense while protecting strategic sectors and still keeping their economies competitive. This is a difficult balance. What do you make of this balancing act in light of the conversation you just had?
If it's easy, I think Poland will not pursue it because it's a challenging. I think Polish people will make it happen. I mean, I don't know how soon, how effectively, But the bottom line is that this is reality. So as much as it sounds and it seems difficult, at least from my perspective, I think we can work it out. We here meaning the United States and Poland together. And obviously the big chunk of the homework will come from Poland. But I have no doubt this will not be unsolvable situation.
This panel also raised the question of what should come next in terms of economic resilience. The energy mix was mentioned, the structure of capital. So did you find an answer to this question?
I think so. I think energy security is really important more than ever. Energy security, energy independence. I mean, nowadays we talked about AI, data center, everything. It sounds beautiful, but without energy, how can you make your economy functioning? So I think economic security is really about energy security. I'm so glad that United States and Poland, at multiple levels, we have a very constructive, active conversation how to work it out.
Anthony, thank you very much for guiding this
Thank
session.
you. My pleasure. Thank you so
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move to another session, the ministerial session, which is entitled Preparing for Wars to Come, the Community of Democracies in Times of Global Risk.
Please welcome Radosław Sikorski, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland.
Andriy Sybiha, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
This session will be led by Sharon Weinberger, a reporter in residence at Omidyar Network.
And this session includes Q&A, so prepare your questions and please enjoy the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, ministers. So we are now in the 5th year of the war in Ukraine, and this is also the 5th conference of Strategic Ark, and also my 4th time being here. If someone had told me 5 years ago that we would be having these similar discussions 5 years later, I'm not sure I would have believed it. But there's some optimism here that Ukraine is free, Ukraine is independent, Ukraine is fighting. But given where we are now, what is the bigger risk? Is it escalation or is it normalization of the conflict? And that question can be for both of you, whoever would like to start.
Let me to start. Well, previous moderator mentioned rainy afternoon in Warsaw. In our tradition, it's a good sign, and my rainy Warsaw morning, I started with a special ceremony. I presented more than 10 orders, special awards from President Zelensky to our Polish friends. What does it mean in practice? In Ukraine, to get such an award, you need to risk your life. But today, it was a great pleasure for me to present these orders to our Polish friends, colleagues, partners for their good deeds. It's a true recognition of the Polish contribution in our resilience and resistance. Ukraine holds the line. That's my first message. Ukraine holds the lines, and also because of the support of our international partners, because we have such allies as Poland. Yes, now we are in a momentum. I just returned back from Brussels, where I attended very important meetings, including FAC meeting at the level of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs. Why we are in a momentum? After the elections in Hungary, it's all about resilience and resistance. It's all about our successes on the battlefield. That's why Ukraine tries to use any opportunity to bring the peace closer. Just and comprehensive. War on our territory. We want to end this war. And for us, it's not just, you see, additional statements. We need to end this war, and we are in a momentum. Why? New dynamics in our EU aspirations. It's also about resilience and resistance. It's also about our successes. We need to keep the mood of our society at a proper level. We spoke with Radek before today morning, and I told him that on the battlefield, you could have enough weaponry, you could have enough equipment, but if the soldier does not have strong mood, it is impossible to defend your country. And to have this spirit, to have this mood, we need successes on our way to become an EU member. We got this additional speed after the Hungarian elections, and we do really count that in the nearest future, our efforts on reforming our economy, on our way to reforms, our efforts will be recognized. It means that 6 clusters will be opened. And here, Radek, we spoke about this with you. We count on your support. We rely on your support. You are the Deputy Prime Minister, minister who always advocates and lobbies our interests of Ukraine, because it's also about Polish interests. It's about European interests. So it is crucial to use the momentum and to get additional speed in our peace efforts. Another point, new role of Europe. New role of Europe in peace efforts. Because of the situation in the Middle East, we have pause in our peace efforts, and because of other reasons. And probably it's a time for Europe to step up, but not as alternative peace track or diplomatic track, but a complementary, not as alternative to the mainstream diplomatic track under the leadership of the USA. So our logic and our proposal was to try to focus with the help of our European allies and to solve some concrete issues. And yesterday I gave an example with an airport ceasefire. We have experience with Russia. What does it mean in practice? There are statements regarding ceasefire. By the way, we proposed yesterday to prolong ceasefire, and we are committed to peace efforts, and we are interested in sustainable long-term ceasefire. So let's try. Let's use our leverage, our instruments, and to try to resolve issues for Ukrainians. Also, what is important? Now we stabilize front. We became stronger. You mentioned 5 years of our resistance and resilience. Now we became stronger, and Russia became weaker. We managed to close the sky for Russian drones. We could shoot down now up to 90%. That's our unique experience, combat experience, daily bitter experience. And now we became a security partner, for example, for the Middle East countries. And the third point, so we hold the line, we close the sky, and we used very effectively our asymmetric special sanctions or asymmetric attacks. And it is really working. We see this. We are in momentum, so to continue pressure, to have the engagement of the USA, to raise the price for Russia to continue further aggression. Putin must admit that he will never achieve his goals in Ukraine. Such a reality now.
Well, I dispute your point that nobody predicted that this war would last this long, because I've argued consistently, I think, including at this conference, that these colonial wars usually take about a decade. And of course, we wish for our Ukrainian neighbors that it should happen earlier, but I think it's wise of them to have a long planning horizon. At the moment, I understand another 2 years, because if things move forward faster, that's a bonus. But it's important for the adversary to know that Ukraine is willing to continue, and we are willing to continue to support it. I think it's Ukraine stabilizing the front and Europe overcoming its paralysis thanks to the magnificent victory of pro-democratic forces in Hungary, that is forcing Putin to recalculate. He now has to calculate whether he can continue with this war for another 2 years. And it's a question whether he can. Now, you asked escalation or normalization. I hope we are not back to the silly discussion at the beginning of the war. Oh my God, if we give Ukraine tanks, Putin will escalate. If we give them jets, Putin will escalate. Do you really believe that there is anything that he would not do to win? If he could escalate, he would escalate. But he is now losing more soldiers than he can recruit. He has lost the Battle of the Black Sea. His Air Force does not have domination over Ukrainian skies. And his economy is really beginning to suffer. So I think we should stay the course, and then eventually he has to admit to himself that his original war aims are unachievable. And only then will he negotiate for real.
A quick follow-up on that. Putin recently said the war would, quote, end soon. What do you make of those remarks? What do you think he meant by them?
Well, he's not the only world leader who finds that it's easy to start a war, but not so easy to end a war, and that the adversary has something to say about that.
Minister Sibi, oh, please go.
My point of view is that we are in a pivotal moment, in a turning point moment. We are very close to the point when time could start to work on us. Because of the factors which Minister Sikorsky mentioned, yes, Russian economy is vulnerable, but it is not in a critical stage. Yes, they have losses on the battlefield, but also something is happening there. Recently, we noticed some restrictions in their social media. We see some facts regarding the support of Putin by his population. It is decreasing. And once again, we have our intelligence, we have evaluations from our partners, something is going on there. So we are also in the momentum to strengthen our pressure. So, pivotal moment, and this year could become pivotal to achieve peace. Once again, for us, for Ukraine, 1 day of the war costs approximately $450 million per day. So it's the most challenging for us because we pay the highest price, and now the history of the ink of the history of Europe, and not only of Europe, is the blood of Ukrainian soldiers. We want to end this war once again, and the only way to strengthen, to increase pressure on Russia by different instruments.
If I may add a footnote, I don't think Putin is capable of seriously escalating because he doesn't have the forces. He doesn't have the forces to challenge Finland or all of NATO, and we would see the buildup of forces, just like we saw the buildup of forces for months before his invasion of Ukraine. But he seems to be increasingly desperate. So he might do something provocative that in their imagination would break Western solidarity. You know, the imperial class in Moscow fundamentally misreads the psychology of democracies. Because we are disunited, we are difficult to synchronize, we have lively debates. So they think, you know, one more push and we will be split up or incapable of acting. And actually, look at what we've done over the last 4 years. I mean, the level of support for Ukraine from Europe, from the United States, including now, has been far, far more than I would have expected 5 years ago. And so Putin's calculations are simply wrong, but they may also be dangerous.
But also, with your permission, I remember very well first days of the beginning of this full-scale aggression. I remember skepticism, and nobody believed, probably nobody believed in us. When we instructed our ambassadors to approach some capitals to impose sanctions, They refused. They gave us 3-5 days. And it was the justification of their passive position. I also remember first telephone conversations when some leaders, including Europeans, pushed us to accept capitulation, to accept this Russian ultimatum, to accept Russian demands. And by the way, these demands, they are not changing. Putin didn't change his demands. On contrary, he additionally now demands from us not only withdrawal as one of the preconditions for possible peace deal, not only the withdrawal of our troops, but additionally Russian jurisdiction over the territory which is under our control, Russian currency, Russian flag, Russian legislation. It is not acceptable for us. And all these public statements, that's about propaganda. We remember all this, you see threats regarding nuclear weapons, possibility to use, regarding Oreshnik. And I totally agree with you, Radek, that we experienced all these things in the past. Now it's a time to take decisive steps to end this war.
So we've talked about Ukraine having momentum on the battlefield, about Europe stepping up, also about US support, but we also have an administration that has cut off economic assistance to Ukraine almost to zero, and military assistance has slowed to a crawl, if not cut off. What role are you expecting the United States to have going forward?
Leading role. We need American leadership. We welcome their efforts. We buy weaponry from them. That's why this program, Pearl program, is so crucial for us, because for us it's the only way to buy strategic air defense systems and long-range missiles. So I do not believe, or it is unrealistic to achieve through process of finalization of our peace efforts without American side. It is not possible. We need their engagement, but also in parallel we need their influence and their pressure on Russia.
I think it's important to acknowledge that US weapons deliveries, for which Europe mostly pays, are continuing. We know because 95% of the stuff gets to Ukraine through Poland, and that US targeting data continue to be important. But what needs to be also acknowledged is that both Ukraine has agency. Ukraine cannot be forced into capitulation, particularly when it has solid financial and other European support behind it. So I think the realization is dawning that this war cannot be ended without Ukraine and without Europe.
By the way, that's why Putin, ahead of the parade on the Krasnaya Ploshcha, Red Square, deliberately announced unilaterally this so-called ceasefire. He tried to demonstrate that Ukraine is not subject of all these peace efforts. Then he announced that he agreed with President Trump this ceasefire. How is it possible without Ukraine?
Let me add a footnote. Would you have imagined 5 years ago that Putin, in order to have his victory parade on 9th of May, would need Ukraine's permission?
It's a
green light from Ukraine. That's true. But also in previous years, I always give this example. I have a small collection of diplomatic notes from very strong countries not to attack Russia during the parades when their leaders are there. I have such diplomatic notes. So that's, once again, that's a true recognition of our capacities. And another signal, don't mess with Ukraine.
On a different front, quite literally, we have a rapidly escalating conflict in the Middle East. In what ways, on one hand for Ukraine, this has been an opportunity to provide assistance in counter-drone operations, but in what ways does the conflict in the Middle East complicate matters for resolving the conflict in Ukraine?
Well, the rise in energy prices is a potential gain for Putin. And I say potential because the high prices are there, but you still need to get your products to the market. And here, Putin is in difficulty. And of course, it draws diplomatic and political bandwidth away from Ukraine because the US is focused on that. And physically, it has depleted US ammunition stocks. And that is potentially a problem.
And additionally, probably Russians, they try to use this situation to ease the sanctions, to earn their bloody money on these changes on the prices on energy resources, to refocus global attention to the Middle East. That's why we are interested in stabilization. That's why we are there. We proposed our package, security package of cooperation, and also our interest to help them not to use such quantities, to our Middle East partners, such quantities of the very expensive long-range anti-ballistic missiles. And we have new reality with our presence there. It's also, our presence is also European presence there. And also it's about our new combat experience, because Iran also use there another type of drones which Russia used in Ukraine. So for us, it's also about combat experience and also about long-term cooperation, geopolitical cooperation, energy resources, and other important benefits and advantages, mutually beneficial cooperation. So we became a security partner and security provider. That's a new reality.
Andrei and I collaborated in bringing out a Shahed drone out of Ukraine and taking it to the US. And we had it shown at CPAC in Washington. We showed it on the Capitol and at the UN. It was then in the House of Commons, also the Munich Security Conference. And I think it was important to show this Iranian-Russian practical alliance in hitting their neighbors with the same type of weapon. And I hope everybody in Washington sees this link between the theocratic Iran and autocratic Russia.
And according to our intelligence, the Russian side provides intelligence data to Iran.
There have been reports that the U.S. and Ukraine are on the verge of a defense agreement, I think is on exports of drones. Can you bring us up to date on that? Is there indeed an agreement imminent?
You mean with the USA?
Yes. I think this was on drone production and exports.
Well, so for us, USA is the closest ally. What does it mean? That we are open to have long-term cooperation, and also we are open to have so-called drone deal. It's about our unique combat experience, about our unique, really advanced, sophisticated technologies, and also about co-production. So we are interested in such type of cooperation. We are working with our US partners, and we are interested to scale up and to develop this type of cooperation because it's really mutually beneficial.
We've been talking about this for a while, though. Are there difficulties reaching the final agreement?
You see, it's a normal process because it's about security. We are in a war. I mean, Ukrainian side. So we try also to use such type of arrangements, agreements, also to strengthen our defense capacities. So we are in a process.
Minister Sikorski, Europe obviously has been very focused, as has the U.S., on reindustrialization, increasing defense manufacturing. And Poland has been on the lead on this. Is Europe moving fast enough, the rest of Europe?
We shall see in the run-up to the Ankara summit. And NATO is closely watching budgetary decisions for next year to see whether we are on track to fulfill the pledges that we made at The Hague and promises that we made to President Trump. He was right in his first term to to tell allies what's what. We have doubled since then, but we need to double again. Poland, as you heard from the finance minister, is in the lead, and we think we're a good example to follow. We need to increase spending, but also to increase production of our own munitions, but also the United States is finding itself with bottlenecks. You need to broaden your production capacity, and US companies are very welcome to do it in partnership with us here in Europe.
And with your permission, answering on your previous question, one important element, licenses. So our lesson learned, we need to be more self-sufficient. We scaled up our defense industry, and now we could cover more than 40% of the needs of our army. But we still have dependence on strategic air defense systems with anti-ballistic capacities. So we approach some of our partners to start to produce some types of critical weaponry also on Ukrainian territory. And we have really serious proposals in return. One point. Another point, we are developing and we are advancing in our national air defense system. So here my signal. We should become more self-sufficient in producing critical weaponry and critical equipment. That's crucial, and it's also about true resilience and resistance. And we are open for such type of cooperation with our closest allies and also with Poland.
I'll add one more thing. Europe is famously overregulated, but our military and our defense industry tells us that the US is also overregulated in the area of the export of technologies. And this might sound defensive, but we are finding it difficult to modernize US-built radars because the process of allowing the technology to be exported is so cumbersome in the US.
So as a add-on to that, given also the lesson of Ukraine, of independence and how much Ukraine has been able to boost production of things like drones, is Poland taking a lesson from that, of wanting to increase production over imports?
Everybody's learning lessons from Ukraine. I think it's partly because they have a unique market for military technology, which stems from the independent, competitive logistical chains for military units, and it's all private mostly. And what Ukraine is particularly good at is at making effective things that are good enough and that are cheap. You know, you win wars with battles. You win battles with operational art, but you win wars by sustaining your effort economically. So this Ukrainian ability to pick targets and match Russian missiles and planes and everything with affordable weapons is really important.
By the way, because of our really great technologies, drone technologies, Russian advantage in manpower is no longer an advantage because of our use of drones, not only aerial drones. We are advancing also in land drones, sea drones, and what is also important for our partners, feedback from the battlefield. We know this. It's a true asset. It's a true asset, and once again, we are ready to share with this experience and to establish mutually beneficial cooperation, drone deals with our partners. It's about our strengths, but it's about our security, because European security and Ukrainian security, they are indivisible.
How important do you think that, as you mentioned, Ukraine's advances in drone production are responsible for the momentum that you've described on the battlefield? Is it partly significant, the majority?
It's like a game changer,
Yeah.
my point of view. And it is a factor which really make an advantage for Ukrainian side. For Ukrainian side, we have parity with Russians, because they have total, you see, superiority in fighter jets because of different reasons. They have advantages in long-range ammunitions, but in drones we have parity, and on some types of drones we are ahead of them.
And this is important because, A, it creates a different battlefield, a battlefield in which tactical surprise is impossible to achieve because each side sees the other side to the depth of 50 kilometers. And secondly, it's important for us because I bet you whoever is in charge in Russia after this war will not rebuild the Russian army as it was in 2022, but will build a new type of Russian army that will have drawn lessons from their misadventures in Ukraine. And we have to match them. We have to invest in deterring on the future battlefield, not on the past one.
So do you think other NATO that the members of NATO are doing that? Are they incorporating those lessons?
I'm not satisfied that we are doing it enough. We do have a NATO institution called JTEC in my home city of Bydgoszcz. It's a joint analysis and training center where Ukrainian officers are discussing these things with NATO officers. But the best lessons learned at the battlefield, and between people seeing it and governments ordering this stuff, building the factories, and then getting their armies equipped in it, and creating the art, the operational art that encompasses these new technologies, that there's a necessary time lag, but it should be shortened.
By the way, we have some agreements with our partners to send our instructors to train armies of to train armies of our partners, and also about consequences of using the drones. For example, because of this, gray zone is extended up to 40–50%. What does it mean in practice, for example, for artillery? Now, these short-range artillery shells up to 17 kilometers or 20 kilometers, they are useless. So we are in a stage that we must use mainly artillery ammunition, artillery shells with long-range capacities up to 40–50 kilometers. It's also important for the NATO armies to have our feedback and our experience also from this point of view. And we have such consequences not only for artillery, but for other types of weaponry or army.
I see a few NATO officers in this room, but and they may not like what I'm about to say, but I'll say it anyway. Until a year or two ago, we imagined that it was us who was training the Ukrainians, and now we need to take lessons from them because they know the modern face of war, and there is no substitute for practical experience.
Yeah.
The best way to have Ukraine in NATO. The most cost-effective.
Since we do quite a few interesting people in the audience, I want to open it up for questions. I'm going to go straight to the first row because I can see it best.
Does this work? Yeah. François Heisbourg, it's a great pleasure to see you, both of you, and Radek in particular, an old friend. I was just listening to what you were both saying about lessons learned from Ukraine. At the beginning of the war against Iran, when Ukraine first made its offer for transfer of expertise, President Trump's reaction was, we don't need Ukrainian expertise. We build the best drones in the world. Well, that may have been technically true in the sense that the US has reproduced the Shahid. That's not necessarily a badge of approval. What I do note is that during the war against Iran, the locals used oodles of Patriots and of THAAD. THAAD, several $1 million per warhead. Patriot, $1 million plus per warhead to shoot down drones. And I would add that the record was not more distinguished in terms of other Western-leaning or Western countries involved tangentially in the conflict. I also remember that last year, and this is to make your point, Radek, when drones were sent into Polish skies, NATO defenses managed to shoot down 4 out of the 21 drones. Whereas in Ukraine, it's usually Ukraine which manages to shoot down 17 out of 21 drones. So what is it that Europe in particular can do in terms of correcting this situation? I say Europe because the United States is unfortunately no longer delivering arms. The Pearl program is well funded by the Europeans, but the Americans have put us on notice that because of the war in Iran, they would not be in a position to make their deliveries anytime soon. So comments, please, from both of you gentlemen.
I think your last piece of information, thankfully, is not quite correct.
Yes, we don't have any delays with the supply of weaponry from the USA.
And on the larger point, we need to have drone and anti-drone technologies are an explosive area of innovation, and we need to involve the private sector and a plethora of different systems to see what works. Thanks to the European Union's SAFE mechanism, we now have the money to do that.
And we are open for such type of cooperation, and we are ready to co-produce. And Ukraine is interested to conclude drone deal with EU, and we are also ready to contribute to protect airspace, EU airspace, with our drones and our drones technologies.
Great. Another question back on the side there. And just because our time is short, if we can keep the questions direct so the ministers have time to answer.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Bartek Staniszewski, I'm director of the think tank Bright Blue. What's the end game for Ukraine? Russians will not give up unconditionally. What's the kind of peace deal that Ukrainian people might accept and that also crucially the Ukrainian military leaders might accept?
Just and comprehensive peace. No alternatives for this. Ukraine will never accept any formula, any initiative at the cost of our territorial integrity and sovereignty. Our approach, stay where we are now, sustainable ceasefire, it will open path for broader peace negotiations. We could use all diplomatic instruments to finalize peace efforts. So just and comprehensive peace, not to manipulate with this term.
I believe the war will only end when Russia concludes, I mean Putin and the people around him, that the aim of rebuilding the Russian Empire is unachievable, and it's only with a post-imperial Russia that we can normalize relations.
And by the way, we have doable proposals, and we presented them. So the only obstacle is Russia for our peace efforts.
Very briefly, as time is short, if I could just ask each of you, if we're here next year discussing this topic, do you have any predictions about where we'll be in terms of the conflict?
I will be brief. So Ukraine holds the line, and we have cards, and hopefully it will be peacetime.
I think we will probably have a post-Putin leader in Russia with whom a normal negotiation will be possible.
A year from now. That's quite a bold prediction. What makes you think that? Okay, well, we'll have to revisit this a year from now. Gentlemen, thank you so much, and thank you to our host. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, ministers, and thank you, Sharon, for guiding the discussion. Yeah, Sharon, could you please come over to reflect on what we've just heard?
So one thing that often comes back in discussions about European security is the gap between recognizing the threat and organizing ourselves accordingly. Did you hear today a convincing answer to the question of whether democracies are really preparing for a long confrontation?
I think they are, and they have. I think part of the point was made that Minister Sikorski made, that he was not at all surprised that 5 years on that we're in this place. That in fact Ukraine has been excellent at innovating, that it's at the place it's been because of how quickly it's been able to adapt to the war, because Europe has been able to step up.
Thank you very much, Sharon. That was very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will now have a short, well-deserved coffee break, but it is important that we reconvene at 4 p.m. And to lure you, to trick you into being on time, I can say that there will be a small visual surprise. So be 4 p.m. sharp, and in the meantime, thank you very much and enjoy the break.
See you soon. We are now ready to move to our next session. Serious strategy begins with uncomfortable scenarios and uncomfortable questions. Ours is, how is the great transatlantic divide going to happen?
Please welcome to the stage François Isbourg, Special Advisor, Foundation for Strategic Research.
Anthony Kim, editor of the Index of Economic Freedom Heritage Foundation.
Ignacy Niemczycki, Secretary of State, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland.
Alina Poliakowa, President and CEO, Center for European Policy Analysis.
The session will be moderated by Marcin Terlikowski, Head of Research, the Polish Institute of International Affairs.
We will show a short clip before the conversation begins. This session will include Q&A, so please be ready with concise questions. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. After a very strong, very rich start with the ministers discussing all ins and outs of the situation as regards transatlantic relations and security in Europe, we are launching a first full panel session today. And I have to say that I need to start, and I was thinking about it for a long time, I need to start with saying that I really don't know why the title of the session is so deterministic in its nature. Why are we asking how is the transatlantic divide going to happen? And I warned my distinguished participants, panelists today, that I will be very much challenging this question, as I do not really take this as the only one scenario which we may see as regards the transatlantic relations. So without further ado, let me jump straight to Anthony and ask you this very question about determinism. We have seen so many messages, comments coming from both the US and European leaders, experts, decision makers, saying that now, for sure, during the Trump second administration and beyond it, the transatlantic divide has to happen, that this is the only trajectory which the US foreign policy can take, that the US simply is poised to disengage from European security. This is how we have been bombarded with different messages of that kind. Is it really the case? Is it really the only way how European approach to alliances, to global politics can evolve, particularly given that we have a new generation of leaders coming, taking over power in Washington, the leaders who do not know either the Cold War or the post-Cold War peace dividend era. So are we, as things are seen from the Washington, is the transatlantic divide going to happen by default?
Thank you, Marcin. That's a very good starting question, which has a lot of dimensions and components. And also, what you just described, the observation, not your own, but as a neutral moderator, you are setting the stage. I'll be candid and also practical. I'm not here to be cute. I'm not a diplomat. I'm not here to be diplomatic. But I want to submit for our audience, I think we need to have a bit of a longer perspectives. I mean, if you look at just narrow band, we're definitely going through some kind of turbulence. But life is not like that, and our relationship, transatlantic relationship, is not like that. I mean, allow me to say, when I was coming to Warsaw yesterday from Washington through Germany and here, I was just expecting it was a night flight, red eye, just easy flight, red eye, sleep. But it was turbulent. So there is a turbulence all the time. And I do believe that division in our transatlantic relationship division has been there all the time, but different degree. Maybe this time, many people said this is totally unacceptable, this is totally different, but I really think that this division divide, in the end, it will turn out to be something positive and constructive. We do not know the net degree, but where we are today, I don't think in a longer term, it's not really anything exceptional, but this is something that we need to together navigate and get through.
Thank you. I can't really help myself and ask now Francois on how things look from the European side. And again, I would say that particularly after January 2025, we've seen a number of comments that in the current circumstances, given how the transatlantic relations look like, given the messages, signals sent by the US administration to Europe, there is no other way for Europe, if it wants to achieve strategic relevance, finally become what used to be called as Europe as a strategic actor. If this vision concept, sometimes referred to as European strategic autonomy, or even before l'Europe de la Défense, if this is to become a political project, an implementable political project, then Europe has no other choice than to detach itself from the US. We've heard, again, this is me kind of reporting the debates, reporting the media commentaries, but also commentaries from leaders of both European capitals and institutions. Given your expertise, is it really the case? Is European strategic future possible only with the US and Europe taking a divorce?
Yeah, the division of the Transatlantic Alliance didn't begin with Trump, and it'll probably not end with Trump. It began symbolically, for me at least as an observer. Some would say it began at the time of the Iraq War. That's disputable, but it's a marker. It began more clearly under Obama. The Poles will always remember that it was on the 17th of September of 2010, was it, when the United States announced that American ABMs would not cover Poland, choice of date, awful symbolism, and so on. And the French remember Obama because of the Red Line crisis on Syria in 2013. So there's much here which is not entirely new. And I still remember going to Ukraine during the war, how the very harsh words which my Ukrainian interlocutors would use to talk about Jake Sullivan and Joe Biden at the time. In effect, words which are harsher than those which we heard from Mr. Sibiha earlier on today. So this is a deep change. It's a deep process, and it may well last beyond Trump. The American body politic has changed. We have also discovered, the Americans are discovering the limits of power. What Radek referred to earlier on about the munitions crisis in the US in the wake of the unfinished war with Iran. And I was much gratified to hear Mr. Sibiha saying that Pearl deliveries were still taking place unimpeded and on time towards Ukraine. That is not the message we have been getting, we meaning the countries which are actually paying for the weapons, that is mostly the Western Europeans and Poland, though we have been put on notice that deliveries would be impeded. And they are being impeded, and Mr. President Zelensky has talked about a patriot crisis. This will not change simply because a new president will have arrived from the Mamdani dispensation or whatever. So the Europeans truly do not have much of a choice. I would add, to harden the picture a bit further, that our chiefs of defense staff, this is the case certainly of the French and the German chiefs of defense staff, and I'd be very surprised if the Polish chief of defense staff would not agree that there is a window of vulnerability for Europe between now and 2030. if for whatever reason and under whatever conditions the war in Ukraine is ramped down, President Putin, if he is still around, Pace, what Radek was suggesting earlier on, that he may not be around next year, which I dearly hope he's right on the timing. He'll eventually be right biologically. That window of vulnerability is there, and if the Americans are not in a position to work with us in the defense industrial field to the levels which are necessary, the Europeans simply literally have no choice. The French are now testing the French answer to Eagle Claw. They are now testing the answer to HIMARS. They are testing the functional equivalent of long-range cruise missiles, also known as Tomahawk. The Germans are doing very similar things, and Europe is funding much of that through the SAFE program and other funding sources. Yes, we have to get our act together. The Americans will discover, as they do, that having incentivized us to raise our defense spending, which President Trump did with a great deal of talent and vigor, that somehow the European taxpayer prefers to make the jobs stay in Europe, and that we will not be ordering weapons which the Americans cannot deliver to us. We will be ordering weapons which hopefully we will be able to produce at scale and at speed. That is not a foregone conclusion. It's going to be very, very difficult to meet our production targets. If there's a serious problem in 2027, 2028, I would be quite worried. So no, there is no alternative, but what we may get is something truly less than optimal. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois. Some very strong observations, points on your end, and I really would like to come back to them later on in our conversation. But Alina, we've had two very different voices, Anthony and Francois. Turbulences in transatlantic relations, we've known them. There have been many in the post-Cold War time and also during the Cold War. At the same time, we've heard from Francois that Europe has no other choice. So from your point of view, how you see the effects of the current administration policy towards Europe and also other regions where Europe is concerned as regards its interests? What are the effects of this policy in the short to mid-term, and particularly as you're running a think tank which is a very specialized, let's say, agenda in Washington, so Central and Eastern Europe, do you feel that the approach of the American administration, of the Trump administration to Europe may be different when it comes to, let's say, Western European states and the Central and Eastern Europe? Because again, I'm saying this because again, we have been hearing this kind of observations, arguments, assessments from different parts of expert community, strategic bubble, or even policymakers.
So I find it very interesting that all of us are actually quite in agreement so far. And, you know, it's true that we're in the midst of a long-term restructuring in the Europe-US relationship. And that restructuring didn't start with Trump 2, and it didn't start with Trump 1, and it's not going to end after this administration is out of office either. There is a deep and profound change happening in the United States, in American society, American politics, that is not going to lead to some return that we've seen in the post-Cold War order. But, you know, I will say that, you know, Francois was talking about choices, but being alone is also a choice. You know, initially we all look for the perfect relationship, the perfect partner, but eventually I think we're forced to realize that that doesn't exist, the perfect relationship doesn't exist, the perfect partner doesn't exist, and we have to work with the partner that we have and not the one that we wish we had. And I think for Europe, that's the choice. Do you continue to work with a partner that is shifting and changing, or do you choose to be alone? And I don't think it's an actual choice because of the issues that Francois just mentioned, others have mentioned. But we're about 80 years into the transatlantic partnership now. And I think simply because we're going through a bit of a uncertain moment now, I agree that I don't think it's particularly unique if we look at the historical precedent. It's maybe expressed in a unique way. But the bigger point is that there's a strategic partnership here that is serving both sides and is beneficial to both sides in a way that will, I think, sustain our common commitment to our security, defense, and even values. And there's so much to play for there if Europe makes the choice to play. And what I'm talking about, just a couple of things that we can get into later, and I'll get to your question on the division in Europe. One, there's so much to play for on technology. President Trump or President Xi are meeting, believe later today. We know that the biggest competition from the US point of view is with China, but Europe has a very important role to play there, meaning the strategic partnership, the economic partnership between Europe and the United States is the largest in the world. 1.4 trillion in annual trade, that's huge. Together, there's huge complementarity, and winning the tech competition with China in particular isn't just going to be about having the most innovative frontier LLMs. It's going to be about the infrastructure. How do we lay the groundwork for a global Western digital infrastructure that is not going to be dominated and controlled by Beijing, which is exactly what they're doing in their last 5-year plan. If anybody read that, I really encourage you to read it because you'll fully understand why there is no choice. There's no choice when it comes to our joint defense and security, and there's no choice when it comes to the global competition, because China is strategically creating dependencies. Which we're not going to be able to break very, very soon. And that really is in the infrastructure sector. And I will say this is where Europe actually leads. We can talk about where Europe leads, but this is such a clear piece of it. And I think going back to this question about, where does the current administration see Europe in its priorities? Well, I think many of you here are probably aware of the national security strategy that many people had a very emotional reaction to. But my reaction was that, this was a document that was fascinating to read as a political statement. But at the end of the day, what I saw there was that the US and this administration wants a strong and strategically competitive Europe that is an equal partner to the United States. And if the administration didn't care about Europe, why would they be talking about it so much? Why would the vice president be coming here to different countries? Why would we be constantly engaging at the leader level with President Trump and European leaders? That's not an administration that says it doesn't care about Europe. That's an administration that's very frustrated with some decisions some European countries have made. And I think here is where the countries of Central Europe have a real serious opportunity. Because if we look at the future of Europe, just if we look at the future of the transatlantic relationship, to my mind, it is in Central Eastern Europe. Central Eastern Europe is the center of defense. It is the center of dynamism, I would say, technological innovation, and it all starts by building the infrastructure at home at a regional level that Poland is very much leading on as well, and other countries are engaged in that through 3Cs and other initiatives. And I think this is how you win a positive long-term relationship with the US. It's about delivering results. And frankly, whether we have a Democratic administration or a continuation of J.D. Vance or Marco Rubio or whoever wins potentially in the next term, that's still going to be what people will look for in the US, what all future politicians will look for. What are you delivering? What are you bringing to the table? And there's so much that Europe can deliver. I think the problem I see now in a lot of conversations in Europe is that there's a desire to look for that perfect partner in Beijing. And I think this would be the big strategic mistake, to think that because we're having uncertainties, issues in the transatlantic relationship, that you will find your perfect match out there in the Far East in China.
Thank you, Alina. Do not look for a perfect match abroad, far, far abroad. Look for the old, good, well-known partners. That's a nice message. Again, which I will like to explore later in our discussion. But now let's turn to Ignacy, last but definitely not least. We've seen Poland also during the Polish presidency in the EU, which was a year ago, basically, but that was quite a remarkable time. We've seen Poland working actively to convince other European capitals, to convince European Union institutions, to present the vision that the response to the challenges, both in security, of course, I mean Russia and its imperialistic, aggressive policy towards Europe, but also in trade, technology to China, that this response can be a joint European-US response. We have seen it also with Polish approach to the European Union novel tools regarding support for defense industry. And Poland has been, and it's been many different leaders, yourself, saying that Europe and the US can and should go together, even if there is a redefined, let's say, content of this relationship. Do you feel that this Polish position, this Polish concept, I would even say a political vision, is gaining traction both in Brussels and in Washington and in different capitals in Europe, which have been perhaps more reluctant to embrace the new reality of the transatlantic relations?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. First, I really appreciate what Alina has said. It's a good life advice. You don't always get a perfect partner, and probably we feel so on both sides of the Atlantic. When it comes to the European Union, I think it's important to notice that Poland is quite credible when we talk about relations with the US, because it's been a very special and continues to be a very special relation for us. So when we are talking about changes in those relations, others actually listen, simply because they know what we're talking about. But first, let me go back, and Alina has mentioned that a bit, to the US position. Because to some extent, I feel it goes the other way around. If you look at the U.S. national security strategy, if you look at the U.S. national defense strategy, if you look at the administration's decision in March 2025 not to finance Ukraine, this all tells us that the U.S. intends to limit its involvement in Europe. And I fully agree. This hasn't begun with Trump. We've seen that before. It's a long-term process. Maybe now we just see it on paper, and that, in a way, that's very helpful. So I think President Trump has asked us to take on the responsibility for security here in Europe, and we are responding. And you referred to the Polish presidency last year, and this was actually one of the key words of Prime Minister Tusk's speech in Strasbourg during the opening of the Polish presidency, that Europe needs to take responsibility for its own security. What we're trying to convince the EU is that European Union can and should be a geopolitical power. We've been so focused on economy for quite some time, and that's important. In some areas we're lagging behind the US. We need to catch up, but I fully agree on China. We can be a very good partner for the US. But I think what we've managed to do in the last 2 years, we've managed to develop this security and defense dimension. And this is completely new for the European Union. Even after Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine, many would say that the European Union is not the fora where we should respond. Right now, we also see EU as a basis for our security. You might know that we've been discussing the Article 42.7, which to some extent is similar to Article 5 of the NATO treaty. But we in Poland see the EU as this cooperation in defense at the EU level as making NATO stronger. So it's not either or. That's something I want to make absolutely clear. So to sum up, I think we're actually responding to what our friends in the US have been asking for. We're taking responsibility, and this will mean that we'll be investing more in our defense industry. But still, if you look at the numbers, we're spending around 60% of defense spending in Europe still goes to US. The amount of contracts that we have here in Poland, I think it's $63 billion that goes to the US. So actually, we still remain and we will remain crucial partners for each other. For the US, and this is important to also notice ahead of the talks with China, for the US, it's the EU that remains the biggest trade partner. And when we look at investments, I think EU investments in the US are around 2.2 or 2.5 trillion dollars. Yeah, so that's absolutely enormous.
Thank you, Ignacy, for bringing these numbers to the panel discussion, because again, that's something I guess we need to dig deeper a little bit in a minute. And if I were to summarize what you've just said, is that a stronger EU, a stronger Europe, which plays a geopolitical role, is at the same time an asset, so to say, in developing or redefining the relationship with the US, in which the burden may be split differently, but the relationship remains even more credible and more valid precisely because of the Europe's implemented, so to say, goal of gaining more credibility. That's something, again, what we will be discussing later. Anthony, if I can...
Yeah, just comment on that. Yes, I think quite often we focus on, let's call it style, when we see our relations. And sometimes I'm frustrated with that as well. But I actually do appreciate President Trump being very candid on some things. And then we can actually say, okay, so there are diverse interests on some things, and we need to discuss it in the open. But in the end, I think in the long term, it's quite clear that both sides need each other.
Okay, so we're getting now into the discussion phase. Alina was first, then Francois, and then Anthony.
I just have a very brief comment on the defense partnership, because I think the Iran war has added a completely new layer to this. And that's having to do with the burn rate of our Patriots, interceptors, all of our capabilities in Iran is probably higher than what we have seen in the public domain. And what that's going to mean is that the US defense industrial base is going to get blocked, I think, quite soon from selling internationally. Yeah. And for a lot of companies, there's going to be a potential disaster because about 30 to 40% of our primes, defense primes, business is international. But already we're starting to see some quiet conversations happening in the United States about the need to produce for the homeland and homeland defense, which means no more Pearl potentially, maybe, and no more sales. So all of these contracts the European countries have in the works really have to start thinking about what that's going to mean if this comes to pass. And I think there's no way around it at this point.
Okay, that's quite interesting. I think from perspective of Francois, please.
Two points. First of all, I agree with Alina, but the Europeans should not let themselves swallow the Trumpian vision of American defense industry. Trump assumes that the American defense industry can do everything. We assume that the American defense industry can do everything. But you know what happened on the way to the Draghi report, from which this famous 60–70% figure came from. The question which was asked by the Draghi people was, what is the percentage of weaponry which is imported by the Europeans, which comes from the United States? And the answer was very accurately about 60–70%, because most of our stuff is not imported from Israel or even South Korea, although Poland does a lot of that. Most of it comes from the US, but it's not 60% of European defense spending which goes to the United States. This is idiotic. Are there any American battleships in any of the European navies? How many tanks are there in Europe which were produced by American manufacturers? Yes, you have F-35s, but you have an even greater number of Eurofighters and Rafale when you do the addition at the end of the day. The fact is that the figure, according to the IISS, which has actually done its homework on this, was around 30% of European acquisition is done vis-à-vis the US defense industry, which means that 70% isn't, which is another way of saying that the Europeans, if they put their mind to it, and if they put the money which is necessary, the money part is the easy part, and the money is flowing. The money is now flowing. Now we have to do the scaling up. But we know what it needs to be done, and it's actually quite doable. It's not as if from one day to the next, Alina, 60% of European defense spending would no longer be able to proceed with meaningful acquisition because the Americans would have decided that they can no longer export. I agree with your basic point, which is the US is going to hunker down, which is probably wise enough given that moving stuff from the Far East to service the Gulf War is probably not a great strategic idea, given what is happening with the problems that we have with China. Just a last point, if I may. I said this stuff began before Trump and will continue after Trump, but Trump matters in a very special way. Trump has an undiluted track record of essentially dissing the Europeans ever since he started writing about NATO and the Europeans in the 1980s, in the same way that he has an undiluted record of sympathy towards first the USSR and then Russia. Trump has an opinion, he has a vision of Europe, and it's not a friendly one, believe me. We have to work with him. I agree with everything that has been said here about that, but we must not assume that he has a benign view and vision of Europe.
Now we're having a big discussion, I think, and that was precisely the goal of this session. And of course, Anthony, just before I give you the floor, I think we should not get into the methodological question on how to count acquisition versus current spending MRO cost. That's absolutely fascinating opinion. I'd love to do it perhaps over coffee, but definitely this is very important to speak about how much dependent we are on as Europeans on the American defense industrial and technological base. But coming back to you, Anthony, and of course I remember that you asked for to finger, but if you can kind of work in also a reaction to the following. We've heard that you said that there has been turbulence. I fully agree, and in the transatlantic relations, there were ups and downs, and Francois mentioned that as well in context of Syria, in context here in Poland of the missile defense project, although we have seen Redzikowo now with full operational capacity up and running basically, and being part of the Allied defenses as planned. But we've seen these ups and downs, we've seen turbulence, but we are, or again, looking at the debates among experts and in media, we have been facing, and my question is, are we still facing a threat that the current administration will make a kind of a deal over Ukraine, which will be the turbulence, the kind of turbulence which will leave lasting marks on the relationship, and the result of which will be that the very positive potential of cooperation, which Alina mentioned, which Ignacy mentioned, in technologies, also in defense industry, I will try to bring that later to the floor, will be simply untapped and unexploited because we won't be able to kind of get over the kind of strategic shock which may happen if there is this kind of a grand deal. Do you think it's a realistic scenario? We should simply focus on other stuff.
I want to say it's always good to hear many of the good practical points regarding the Trump administration being stated by our partners and friends in Europe rather than me. So not 100%, but I really echo many points good points, practical points in terms of this ongoing, let's say, reconfiguration in the transatlantic, all positive. I think we're all in the same kind of playground or stadium or arena, but not like a same location. I mean, that's expected. And also for our informed audience, I want to be a bit more straightforward and concise, because the reason we feel really, oh my goodness, now this transatlantic relationship is really getting wider divisions and all that, I think that's a very natural reaction. But again, I want to invite you to take a half step back, at least for this conversation, because our transatlantic relationship has been growing no matter what. I mean, it's not like a constant, small, whatever beginning project. This is now 75, 76 years. I mean, look at this. From the very beginning, it was, in a way, very much narrow band of security, assistance, and cooperation. But where we are today, it's much bigger than security dimension. We're talking about energy, technology, and everything. And I think that this transatlantic space has been so grown in a positive way, widened, expanded, and deepened. I think that's why we feel, oh my goodness, this time it's really a bit, uncomfortable. I mean, again, I don't blame that. But what I'm saying is that this is a true opportunity in my view. I mean, it happens to be Trump, and you made a good point, François. I've been with this think tank Heritage Foundation in Washington since 2001. So about, 25 years. I have seen many movies, very exciting movies. Every movie is different. I'm talking about geoeconomic and geopolitical setting. And also, if I may, really, I don't think we want to be overly analytical in terms of what's really unfolding in front of our eyes in this short time span. Again, I want to invite all of us to take a half step back, because we should not miss this unique opportunity in front of us, in my view. Also, probably most importantly, I mean, when you talk about transatlantic relationship, I mean, let's be candid. It's a big relationship. As I told you, it's been growing too. I mean, if you look at transatlantic relationship from the prism of U.S.-Polish partnership alliance and relationship, I think this is fantastic. If you look at transatlantic relationship through the prism of United States and Baltic nations, it's fantastic. I mean, it's not like an equal every year it'll be growing like a certain person. It's not like that. It's really zigzagging. It's really unpredictable. But trend line, the pattern is crystal clear. It's something positive and constructive. So all I'm saying is, again, if you look at transatlantic relationship, let's try to be really measured. And also what's been happening from Washington and in Washington, I think it's a very good invitation for our partners and allies in Europe, especially, if I may, like-minded, willing partners, to be proactive rather than, as usual, maybe over-analytical or reactive. This is a very Trumpian way of invitation. You may not like it, that's fine. You shouldn't, I mean, I'm not saying you should like it. I mean, again, there are ups and downs. So within these seeming divisions, I still think, thanks to countries like Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and many others perhaps, I think we still have very strategic, practical opportunity to add and multiply. It seems to be we are in some kind of division and subtraction, fine. But in reality, what we need to focus on is how to add and multiply our collective willingness and capacity. Not because I'm attending this PISM conference. I think US-Poland partnership is one of the backbones of that future transatlantic relationship. Maybe the backbone in this case, because you look at this, energy security, nuclear, everything, defense cooperation, and AI, data center potential, everything. Now, this is a real widened opportunity ahead of us. Last point, there are no permanent victories and defeats in our transatlantic relationship. There will be always constant, small, permanent arguments and debates and disagreements. But that's Those things are ingredients of our greater future transatlantic relationship. And once again, I think Poland has a unique role to play.
Thank you, Anthony. To said something that you encourage everybody to take a step back and take let's say, a fresh look or a different look on the state of transatlantic relations. And this is very much appreciated because this is also the kind of the gold standard of the analytical work, of a work of an analyst, is to take a step back and sometimes verify with data the observations which may be superficial. But building on what you said is kind of a positive view of what is there in the transatlantic relation and what can be in the future. I'd like to come back to Alina and then to Ignacy and combine this with what you mentioned before on and combine the internal American policy with the potential you mentioned. We've again seen in media a lot of fuss about the US midterms. And we've seen, and I was recently in Washington DC in the PISM office there, meeting American colleagues. And I've heard also that it's not only any longer only the House of Representatives, but also Senate, which is on the table. There may be a big shift in American politics in January 2027. Given if this happens, and sooner or later this will happen anyway, it's just a matter of the question if it is 2, 4, 6 years. If this happens, and if we have, and we do have this kind of grassroots potential in transatlantic relations as regards new technologies, you mentioned IT infrastructure, and you mentioned defense industry. How we can we see actually a new opening in the transatlantic relations in year, 2 years? If this what we don't like, I mean the Trump administration style, if this disappears and the challenges remain, and it will be easier for European nations and political leaders to digest and accommodate with the new administrations, and then we will be able simply to untap the potential in this new tech, defense, energy. How's your view on that?
It's a lot of questions. I'll try to be brief. But, I think that when I look across the political spectrum, and, at CEPA, we are bipartisan, we're nonpartisan, so I talk to everyone on all sides, the administration and Congress, et cetera. And the transformation that we're seeing in both sides of the political aisle, it's leading to that horseshoe model that has become something that we talk about quite normally now, but it wasn't that long ago. Inside the Democratic Party, you have this real battle that's bubbling under the surface for now, but it's very real, between the progressive left, potentially embodied in Mandani, but he's not the only one. And I would say the more centrist moderate Dems, which are becoming fewer and fewer, frankly. And then we've had the same transformation that's been happening on the Republican side. And I would say that this is something that almost every European country is or has been going through as well. Look at France, look at Germany, look at Sweden. We are seeing underlying trends that are actually quite similar across the Atlantic. So what that means to me is that we're going to have a new normal. When we are going to have different kinds of political forces, maybe more far right-leaning forces in Europe, maybe more far left-leaning forces in some other countries, maybe even the United States. The midterms, I think, in the US are interesting, but highly unpredictable. Every single day, we're seeing new redistricting happening and new changes to very specific districts in some of the swing states. This just happened in Virginia recently. So very likely, the House will be Dem. That's just a historical precedent. I'm very skeptical the Senate will flip. I think that's a narrow path for the Democrats. Either way, we're going to have most likely a divided Congress. What is that going to mean for Europe? I'm afraid nothing very positive, because if we have a Dem House, well, what's going to happen for the first 6 months of the new Congress? Probably a lot more impeachment hearings, frankly. That's what's probably going to be taking up a lot of time. So I think Europe needs to prepare itself for a US that will be much more involved in its own internal politics, even more so than now after the midterms. And the United States that will simply, even potentially the president, have a lot less time and focus to even say some maybe uncomfortable things on social media to Europeans, because so much of the internal politics will take over in a very real way, likely after the midterms, and definitely beyond. But I'm actually quite optimistic about Europe's future, because I think if Europe does the hard work that Francois and others are talking about, that the Draghi report outlined. And I'll be clear, Draghi himself says constantly what has been done, what you laid out in your report, almost nothing. That's the real problem. And money is not the problem. It's how do you spend it, what do you spend it on, how do you build the capacities, and how do you unleash private capital? This is the big challenge for Europe. But I think in the end, Europe is going to come out much stronger than it is today. But I think we're still in a very, very fragile moment, as Francois was saying. The next 5 years for Europe in particular are going to be very, very critical. And I think that will determine whether the continent comes out stronger, better, more competent, more united, or weaker and potentially far more vulnerable to attacks by Russia and others.
Okay, Ignacy, I would like to ask you to follow on this. And meanwhile, I would like the audience to prepare questions. We'll have time for 3 questions, sharp, crisp, not really comments, but questions, please. Ignacy, what is the idea of Poland? We've heard from Anthony that Poland is an ally which is really seen in Washington as a role model with regards to the commitment into defense and developing different, let's say, dimensions of strategic cooperation with the US. What is is this the Polish idea, the concept for addressing, for surviving this time of crunch, this time of vulnerability, and bringing and contributing to the transatlantic relations so that others could follow perhaps the Polish case and we can save the bond which is so unique, as we heard, the bond with the US, I mean?
Thank you. I mean, our approach, I think it's quite clear, and we've been quite vocal about it, that the relationship between the US and Poland remains a key one for us, and especially in terms of security. And I already mentioned that the amount of contracts that we have already signed is around $63 billion. That's absolutely huge. We're spending on US nuclear energy as well. We're working with US on LNG imports, and the list goes on. I think it's quite clear that we are investing in this relationship. We obviously wanted to go both ways. So we are becoming a more and more important customer for the US. It's also worth mentioning that in many ways, in many states, our contracts generate employment. So we're becoming a more important customer for the US. And I hope this will also have an influence on our relationship. Again, our focus on making the European Union stronger also in the defense sphere doesn't mean that we want NATO to be, we don't want NATO to be weaker. We simply feel that making EU stronger will make NATO and the transatlantic bond stronger. We'll see whether this will be the intention on the other side of the Atlantic, but hearing from what Anthony has said, this is exactly the intention on the other side as well.
Okay, so thank you, Ignacy. How we proceed now? We will take 3 questions, and I will collect them. Yes, because I want you to have a final interventions. So we'll collect the questions, and then each of you can either address the questions, which is of course welcomed, or address what you've heard from your co-participants, co-panelists, and so that each of you has 2 minutes. But for that, I need very disciplined audience. I can see 2 questions here, the 2nd row and the 3rd row, I think, or 4th. So here, please introduce yourself, although I can see who.
Eugeniusz Smolar, Center for International Relations and PISM. Mr. Kim, you are not a diplomat, and I'm not a diplomat, so I'm going to go through. First of all, 18% of the F-13 had been produced in Canada and Europe. There is no such a thing as the American production, and also in the armament. Secondly, I am probably the only one in this place who read the Project 2025 produced by the Heritage Foundation's authors. It's not formally, I think, Heritage Foundation. And this is very troubling. and I would like you to respond to it. This is an ideological project which we see implemented in the United States in a very unpleasant directions, autocratic directions. And so when you talk about the Transatlantic Alliance, you mentioned Poland, and thank you very much, we appreciate it. You mentioned Lithuania, Estonia, probably, Sweden. You don't mention France, Germany, even United Kingdom. I mean, how can you imagine the transatlantic relations with Poland and its helm?
Great question.
So, you know, don't be diplomatic and
I'm
tell
ready.
us what is your vision, because what Mr. Trump has been doing is been antagonizing Europe to the extent that even Alternative für Deutschland in Germany, Rassemblement National in France, and Mrs. Meloni says we don't want to have anything to do with that. So transatlantic relations is about Europe and the United States, not about Poland and the United States.
Okay, thank you. We'll take two more questions so that we have time for intervention. So let's collect. I see the gentleman in the fourth row, and I see much more hands. The lady over there, yes.
Robert Michel, Center for Eastern Studies, also formerly NATO. We appreciate it when people come here or from across the pond or from other parts of Europe. They say nice things about Poland and the region. That's good, the potential. The problem is, however, if you look at the policies, and let me just focus on one, close to Alina's heart as well, Russia, which is, you know, if you look at this administration, US administration policy towards Russia, I would make a case, I don't think I'm the only one, that it's detrimental to our interest. Frankly, I believe it's detrimental to the interest of the US as well. If you look at some of the voices coming out these days from Western Europe, let's start nominating people to talk to Putin. Why? The level of enthusiasm to do what rightly Francois has mentioned, which is, you know, money is there. It's very, very different when it comes to investments in real defense in many countries and so on. So that does not show a sufficient appreciation of the threat, which matters here and in this region. So nice words, thank you very much. But the reality is that this region, including Poland, does not seem to have sufficient clout, I guess, to influence the policies which really matter to us. Do you agree with this assessment or not? Thank you.
Thank you. And there is a lady just next to you, sir.
Agnieszka Markiewicz, American Jewish Committee, Central Europe. I'll try to be a disciplined participant and simply ask a question. Mrs. Polyakova, you mentioned that what's going on in Iran and the Middle East is adding yet another layer, and we also heard from Minister Sikorski and Minister Sybiha about the interconnection between Russia and Iran. I just wanted to ask you to comment a little bit on how the division of the approach to what's happening in Iran between Europe and the United States is playing out in this whole image that you described. Thank you.
Thank you for this short question. This makes us a room for one final question from the back to the left side of the audience. Gentleman over there, yes. But please make it short and crisp.
Jakub Groca, the Institute of New Europe. After the United States National Security Strategy was published, there was a lot of uproar, in my opinion, bordering hysteria in Europe that the United States, this administration is bent on driving a wedge between European countries, the Western European countries that want to uphold more or less the same trajectory of European policies, and the so-called healthy nations, or I can remember the exact framing of the security strategy, healthy nations of the Central, Eastern, Southern Europe, and so on. So we have all read this strategy. To what extent, in your opinion, mainly this is a question mainly to Anthony maybe, to what extent is this uproar or hysteria, as I said, justifiable, and how can we soothe or allay these doubts and concerns in Europe that this is going to happen? This is going to be the policy of the United States now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel that we could only start a second one-hour session, so let me give you just 2 minutes, each of you, to react to any, and starting with Anthony, then Francois, then Alina, and then Ignacy.
Great questions and great comments. This is exactly what we need to advance our relationship. I'm not here to say nice words, and having said it, let's be practical and more than anything else, realistic. Realistic. We love to work with the UK, France, and Germany, but at this juncture, it's not easy. Look at what's happening in UK. Look at what's happening in Germany and France. It's a difference, so we cannot move everybody at the same speed. At the same time, our relationship, I wish my last name is not Kim. I wish I'm more European last name so that I can be a bit more, at least, looking like a more genuine. But I really mean it. I care about Trans-Pacific, Transatlantic both, but I really mean it. Our relationship, transatlantic relationship, is not United States and EU. It's not just United States and European continent. This is a very much mosaic of individual partnerships and relationships. What's been happening is we want to start working with, once again, like-minded, willing, capable European partners to really reflect new reality so that we can go to the next elevated transatlantic partnership. But at this juncture, again, you look at what's happening in the United Kingdom. You look at what's happening in Germany in terms of economic competitiveness and everything. You look at France. I mean, what's happening in terms of their internal debates and their external posturing. But given what we have, really, I'm not here to say, just convey nice words. I'm not representing anyone from the administration. But Poland is a very practical, concrete, unique case. We must start building blocks together. And I think that if we miss this opportunity, then I think we'll probably run into serious problems in terms of really hurting our transatlantic relations.
Thank you, Anthony. Francois, you have been very patient. What now? What would you like us to live with?
Martin is absolutely right to point out the problems posed by political uncertainty like that in the United States on the eve of the midterms, like those in Poland where you have a de facto cohabitation between the executive branch and the parliamentary branch. It's so much easier to talk with partners who are not democracies. And that leads me to one point. Martin, you tried to pose the question earlier on, I think it was to Martin, about Russia and Ukraine. Russia is the elephant in the room, and I think no Pole would dispute that. Trump has particular sympathies vis-à-vis Russia. Indeed, the national security strategy considers that the stability of Russia is a primordial American strategic interest. So Putin can rest easy. So very seriously, I would enjoin you to think very hard about Trump's choices. Trump has an ability also to discard those whom he sees as being no longer useful. Mrs. Gentiloni was mentioned earlier on. She defended the Pope. This was a mortal sin. You don't defend the Pope if you want to have good relations with Trump. So Mrs. Gentiloni is over in terms of the Trumpian view of Europe. And of course, American choices in terms of European politics have always been excellent. I really liked the schmoozing fest between Orban and Vance and Trump on the telephone. Great way to go in terms of influencing Europe. This was absolutely magnificent. It was nearly as good as trying to invade Greenland. Yes, Trump matters, and he matters a lot. Just, I can't refrain from a minor provocation. There was talk about talking to Putin. If you want to talk to Putin, you don't choose Schröder, obviously. But I'd rather like to see Radek Sikorski do that job, talking to Putin, doing to Putin what he did to Yanukovych. Wouldn't that be a nice scenario? Thank you.
Now, Alina, please, your 2 minutes.
Just very briefly, a lot of great comments. President Trump is in the first U.S. president to come into office and think that he can have a reset with Putin. For 25 years, every single U.S. president has wanted a reset, and every single U.S. president has failed. But I pretty much guarantee that the next U.S. president will try to have another reset with Russia. call it what you will, it's just the cyclical nature of the personalities that we tend to have in these offices. I just want to correct the record. I think somebody, when they were asking the question, said that I was Russian. I'm not Russian. I'm American, and I'm a Ukrainian Jew originally. So just to be clear, my last name is not Russian, and I'm not Russian. But, you know, on the Russia question writ large, yeah, absolutely. There is, I think, a shortage of strategic thinking when it comes to Russia. And there's not a coherent set of views in the administration, which is why so many people are often confused. You know, the way this administration is organized is very different. Well, I don't want to get in too much into the weeds here, but it's very, very different than what we've seen previously and very different than what we saw in the first Trump administration. And so what you have are a lot of different views being represented. There were a lot of different views represented in the national security strategy. And one of those views or multiples of those views win at certain points when the president sees the world that in a way that aligns with a perspective or not. And that's a very confusing place to live in as a partner and ally. But I think this level of unpredictability is the new normal, and it is the place we're going to live for a long time. Just one last comment, because I think it's important, just very, very briefly, because it could be another 2.5-hour discussion on the effect of Iran on I guess it was U.S. politics, Agnieszka, and the whole situation we're talking about. I think it's quite profound, actually. There's not really, as we know, an end in sight, which will have positive benefits, most likely for Russia, because of the oil price, as we know, at a time when they just need it, plus Russia's ability to continue to supply Iran in all kinds of different ways. We should need to be sanctioning the Russians for that, just like we sanctioned the Chinese ahead of the Xi summit with President Trump. I hope that's something the administration will do very soon. But I think the biggest issue since Gaza, since the Iran war, is that Israel has lost the American public in a really profound and I think irreversible way. And that will have, I think, deep consequences in U.S. foreign policy going forward. And to Europe, very briefly, you know, when I look at what U.S. and Israel are doing together, you know, we're fighting together, we're cooperating together, we're in the skies flying together hand in glove. There is no other ally, no European country can do that with the United States. And I think that really needs to be a wake-up call.
Thank you. Ignacy, your final thoughts. This is where the panel will stop.
Just a quick comment on the last question about the national security strategy uproar. And I would add to that J.D. Vance's speech in Munich. I've said before that in some cases we have this different understanding of the situation and our interests differ. And this was exactly the case. But again, I think it's actually good for us here in Europe to see some things written on paper and see them as an official policy of the American administration, because then we can have a proper reaction. But I don't think we should avoid talking about those difficult subjects. One message I would love to give to our American friends is that please understand that the success of Poland, the economic success of Poland, wouldn't be possible without the EU's single market. So it's 450 people. Our businesses have been exporting quite a lot. Our exports have increased 6 times compared to 2004. So if America wants to have a strong partner here in Europe, actually it's in your interest to see the EU strong. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And you did what I wanted to ask you to join me in applause for thanking the panelists. Thank you so much. We just started having this debate.
I would like to thank our panelists for this very interesting conversation. Marcin, would you like to come over? Take your microphone, please, first.
So a lot of strong statements were made. What stood out the most to you in this conversation?
Just started having a debate, and this particular exchange was a great illustration on the state of the transatlantic relations. We have been really struck by comments and observations and anxieties and far-reaching statements which are based very often on the projected scenarios, on what may happen, and they are omitting at the same time the very, as I said, potential of the transatlantic relations. We've heard numbers, we've heard about the scale of the trade, we've heard about what still binds and keeps US and Europe together. Of course, there have been turbulences, there are turbulences, there are many questions, and we know that the transatlantic relation will be different, it will be redefined. But I believe that this debate and we need more debates like the one we have just moderated to jointly redefine this bond so that it is still there and still unites the two most successful parts of the alliance in the world.
Yeah, but regarding precisely this, so during the conversation you alluded to the pretty deterministic, I would say, title of the panel, and I'm just curious whether after having listened to the conversation, are you more convinced about the adequacy of this title, or maybe not? Maybe someone changed your mind that there is not a question of how that is it really a question of how and not if. That this is going to happen either way, the divide between transatlantic relations.
On the contrary, I believe that all relationships change with time, and we will not see the transatlantic bond the same as it used to be during the Cold War or during the 1990s, but it will still be there because interests are there, even if sometimes we discuss about values or different steps and policy decisions. Both in the US and in Europe, we'll see a new generation of leaders, we'll see new political forces taking over in just a few years, and by definition, new challenges and threats will come. So this policy will be redefined on an ad hoc basis, on a step-by-step basis, and I believe it will continue, although in a different shape, perhaps with a different content.
Marcin, thank you very much once again for moderating the panel. You can now rejoin our audience.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And ladies and gentlemen, our next session follows very naturally from this conversation. If Europe is to carry more responsibility, the question becomes, how do we match strategy with capability, planning, and command structures?
Please welcome Lieutenant General Karol Demanowski, Vice Chief of the General Staff of the Polish Armed Forces.
Linas Linkevičius, Lithuania's ambassador to Sweden.
General Dr. Nicole Schilling, Deputy Inspector General of the German Armed Forces.
The session will be moderated by Łukasz Kulesa, Deputy Head of Research, the Polish Institute of International Affairs.
But first, let's start with a clip. Please enjoy the discussion.
Well, after this rather dynamic introduction, let me warmly welcome you to the last session of the first day of the Strategic Ark, if you just join us, or to invite you to maybe in a natural way go further than the discussion in the session that has just finished. I think we established a couple of things about the new reality that we are facing, the reality of ongoing Russian aggression against Ukraine, of an acute threat from Russia to all of our countries. Second, the US expectations that the Europeans would take primarily responsibility for conventional deterrence on the continent, not an unfair expectation from the US, while the United States would provide this strategic backup. But also, thirdly, the new reality, I would say it's an increased mobilization in Europe, most of Europe, including the countries whose representatives we have in this session, mobilization to actually meet this challenge, not just with words, but also with action and with development of the hard power. So I hope that during this session we'll discuss and establish what we have, what kind of capabilities we already have at our disposal, what we are still lacking, understanding the gaps and weaknesses if the US is much less engaged in Europe, or in extreme cases if it's disengaged from Europe, and then how we can realistically adjust to this situation, politically, strategically, militarily, in a time frame that would actually make sense, in a time frame that would respond to the challenges at hand. I may quote Secretary General Mark Rutte. If anyone thinks here that the European Union or Europe as itself can defend itself without the United States, keep on dreaming. You can't, we can't, but maybe we can. Maybe we can establish also a new way of burden sharing with the United States. Let me go straight to Ambassador Linkevičius. Linas, you have witnessed in your career that included the post of Lithuanian's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Defense, also permanent representative to NATO, right now ambassador to Sweden. So you witnessed quite a lot of transatlantic crisis. You also witnessed probably quite a lot of the calls for the Europeans to take more responsibility for their own defense, usually ending in adjustments rather than revolution. What is different this time, if indeed we are entering a new reality? What we should prepare for? US disengagement or a different form of burden sharing or burden shifting?
Thank you very much. Well, could be long answer, we have no time, but you're right. Through this experience which I went through before, I can say that we were undergoing stress tests not once, and NATO as well. As we know, France was left military chain of command for some time, and NATO HQ was moved from Paris to Brussels, and so on and so forth. But we were, as Europeans, we were accustomed, I would say, or used to act only with Americans. And by the way, Americans were also quite sensitive if in Europe were some signs of autonomy or efforts to do something without United States, I can tell. But we never strive to do that. We tried to do that together. And definitely when we were launching some operations, we were looked around where are American airlift capabilities, lift capabilities, intelligence in particular, logistics, not talking about nuclear shield. And therefore we were always, at least not just Lithuania, I know Poland as well, we were criticizing these initiatives like strategic autonomy from France. Because it smells a bit like isolation, which is not good. Then it was explained it's about capabilities. If it's about capabilities, it's okay. If it's not politically divisive. But again, looking into the history, I believe maybe generals will remember, or maybe not, but when we were, I was defense minister at that time, and when we were choosing title for European Defense Agency, which is within European Union, there was fight between the two titles. It was a group of countries leading by UK, wanted to call it European Capabilities Agency, and there were a group calling European Procurement Agency. So it's obvious what was behind. And it's still valid, by the way, although we have no time for lengthy procurement procedures. By the way, it's to be learned now, but we still somehow managing to do that. And again, one more point on wake-up calls. Usually we are not learning lessons, basically. We're talking about lessons. And I don't know how many wake-up calls needed to wake up for us sometimes. But when it comes to the defense spendings, I remember a speech of Defense Secretary Bob Gates from Obama administration after first term. He was from a Republican, as usual it was tradition, Republican secretary in Democratic cabinet. And he made this farewell speech to security community in Brussels. It was closed audience, it was not public speech, but was, believe me, quite strong. 2011 probably, something like that. And I would not quote, but was said, guys, wake up. It's enough. We will not pay all your bills. We will not pay for everything what you're doing. And generation of politicians in America coming, young people, they don't know what is Cold War. They don't want to know. They want to focus on the problems in the United States. And you should do yourself and should spend those bloody 2% of GDP for defense, which was not happening for a long, long time, as you know. So it was Obama. It was not Trump. When Trump needed to come and to knock the table and demand, right? And then suddenly, after 2018 NATO summit in Brussels, it was counted that Rutte, at that time he was Prime Minister of Netherlands, he said, Mr. President, we increased by defense spendings altogether by 100 billion euros thanks to your leadership. So it saved alliance psychologically, I believe. And then things moved from the stalemate in the summit, which was a very difficult situation. So we are already, we know our history. We know it was not enough to understand and to learn. And now time is even more important because now we have to make things faster, better, less bureaucracy, cutting red tape. We're not doing that sufficiently. And that's my point.
Indeed, let's talk strategic planning, let's talk capabilities, and let's talk the speed of reaction. General Schilling, you are, as deputy Chod, in the middle of the process of radical transformation of the Bundeswehr. That includes not just an influx of money, but also, I would say, new strategic approach with the new military strategy, with the new plan for the development of the armed forces. The ambition is there for Germany to be the strongest conventional army in Europe. But could you walk us through the main elements of this new approach, the ambitions, and maybe some of the challenges that you are witnessing in your daily work?
Yes. For Germany and the German armed forces, the world changed several times, but it also changed last year when there was a change in our basic law, which allows the German parliament to spend more money on defense purposes. This was not possible before in the way it was necessary, and therefore we weren't able to address all capability failures we had. There was no lack of recognizing them and no lack of knowing them, but there was a lack of possibilities to go against this. And after this decision, which was taken in the last February, we really worked hard on our capability assessment. We accepted the capability targets on the NATO summit last year in The Hague, and now our new strategic documents are fundamentally based on those decisions, of course, also from our first national security strategy we have and our defense politics guidelines. But to be honest, those fundamentally changes in also spending and the budget for defense purposes was very decisive. And now, for the first time, we have a a complete strategy and concept for the defense, which consists of the two pillars, the military strategy, as you mentioned before, and very important for the military strategy is to define what are the threats, what is the military change and challenges we are facing, who is the one we have to defend against, and how will the war look like? What do we have to prepare for? Not as in the past, against everything, almost everywhere, but we now have a clear focus where we should go against. And we do this right now. And the second part, the second pillar, is the new capability profile, which prioritize and also sets some certain issues like, of course, UAVs, counter UAVs, autonomy, AI issues, as well as also a resilient logistic systems, which is also something. And I guess the both of us, we are really convinced of that this is decisive for the executability of the family of plans from NATO, that we will be able to bring the troops through Central Europe to the eastern flank. And so those are the priorities we set in the capability profile. And now we are working on, fulfilling those things within the German armed forces.
Can I push you a little bit of what do you already see maybe developing as a main challenge, as a main issue? You have your marching order, but is there something that worries you particularly?
From my point of view, the most important challenge is that we get in line our military priorities, those things we now need the most important and the fast, like it could be, and the possibilities to get better, which also is relying on the industrial base, on the possibilities of the industry, what they can deliver. This is one thing. We have to synchronize and coordinate better than we had in the past. And the second thing, this is a purely military one. We have to adjust our way to fight the war. On that, we really expect to. And to be honest, I guess this is also no secret in this room. What we face or what we see now in Ukraine is not the thing we assume to be the most likely picture of the war we have to prepare for. And so therefore, this is decisive from the military point of view, that we prepare against the right things and that we regain a kind of velocity to be able to react flexible on changes with the whole system. And this is something which is important for doctrine, for training, for the idea how the war looks like, we have to prepare against. And we see many things also in the Ukraine, which is very important for us. And it's sometimes also hard to bring it through the military institution and the command and control structure.
And now let me turn to General Dymanowski. I may say from a moderator's perspective that I think Poland was slightly quicker than Germany in establishing who the main opponent is and start developing the deterrence and defense posture to counter that threat. So the journey may have started slightly earlier, but is still ongoing. So if you hear that Europe should assume the primary responsibility for conventional defense, what's your response to the question of what Poland can actually bring to the table. We have our plans, including long-term development goals and priority areas. Which of these will be especially relevant when it comes to this mission of deterring and, if needed, defending against the Russian threat?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, first and foremost. Thank you very much for having me and putting me in this panel among so great and distinguished fellow panelists. So when it comes to your question, I think very briefly and very simply, Poland as the ally has at least three very important roles for the alliance. The first one is the logistic role. So we have triple role as a area for the logistical support of the allied operations. Number one is that we will be host nation, so we'll host the allied troops which will provide deterrence and defense on the territory of Poland. Number two, we are transit nation, so we are the only one land corridor to the Baltic states, so that's why we are extremely important. And finally, number three, we are troops contributing nations, so we will provide capabilities to deter and defend together with the alliance. And when it comes to the third part, the capabilities, it might not be a kind of revelation for you because it was already announced at the end of the last year, 2025, Minister of National Defense approved the program of the development of the Polish armed forces for the next 15 years, so until 2039. And this program is threat-driven and capability-oriented. And in this program, we defined 7 development priorities. We call them the Big 7. So I think that will exactly reflect what you are asking for. So let me walk you very briefly through these Big 7 elements and give you some kind of argumentation rationale behind it. So number one, quantity multiplied by quality. So most likely, we might be outnumbered by our adversary. So that's why we need something to mitigate this difference in mass and numbers. So that's why we have to harness new technology. We will have to be well trained and better equipped than our opponents in order to mitigate all those risks and be able to outpace and outsmart the enemy. So it is about finding the right balance between quantity and quality. Number two is MDO, multi-domain operations. I know this is a buzzword recently and the latest fashion in military terminology, but put it aside, from my very simple soldier perspective, MDO is about being able to plan and execute operations in each and every domain, including new domains, cyber and space, and make sure that we can coordinate the actions and effects in those domains. So that's why the key element in implementation of MDO is digital backbone, so the proper communication and information systems to provide connectivity and data sharing at the speed of relevance. Number three is the deterrence by denial, so it is integrated air and missile defense. And I think it is self-explanatory that we need this capability to upping the ante for Russia or any other Ottomans is showing that we have very strong defense, and it should be layered from strategic down to tactical and mosaic. So different type of sensors, different types of effectors, including counter-drone sensors and effectors. Number four is deep precision strike. And in fact, we believe this is the most important and decisive capability that has to be developed, not only in Poland, but across the alliance. It is not only about striking capabilities, but also about the ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance system, the command and control systems, and the whole targeting. That's a very important element, and that is a challenge for the Polish armed forces because historically we have never had this type of capabilities. Only recently we started building it. Number five, reserve forces. And again, even though we will try to mitigate this difference in mass and numbers, we still need some mass. because Russia has always been about mass and numbers, so we need some muscles, and only after that we will put some intelligence, we will put some systems to boost up those muscles. And that is why we are now creating a new form of military service, new form of military duty, high readiness reserve. So we are in the pipeline with this process, and some legislative changes have been already started. Number 6, drones. And I think I don't need any further explanation for that. And number 7, AI, artificial intelligence. And when coupled with quantum computing, we believe that might be a real change in the battlefield. It's something that we should develop together as the alliance, and also here in Poland. And it might be useful in many areas, I believe, for to support decision-making processes, to support planning and execution of operations, to support long-term force development processes, and at the end of the day, to support the data management and analysis. So a lot of areas to use and utilize artificial intelligence. Of course, we are aware about some challenges and risks connected with that. So the access to the large amount of data, mainly highly classified data, and of course, some offshoots of artificial intelligence, like hallucinations and things like that. So we have to learn also ourselves. We need some changes in our mentality to be able to trust artificial intelligence. And those seven areas, of course, will be supported by strategic enablers like ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, electronic warfare, but most importantly by logistics and medical support. And I will stop here because as a soldier I should be brief and to the point, so I will stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll come back to some of these elements later on, and also during the Q&A, which I'm sure you will have. Linas, let me come back to you. You've heard about the planning from Germany and Poland. Lithuania is an impressive case in terms of defense spending. If I'm not mistaken, 38% of defense spending, not just capabilities, but also strengthening the size of the armed forces and the overall resilience of the state. You're not a military officer, but I would still ask you if there is anything that you would advise other countries to adopt from the Lithuanian approach, what Lithuania brings to the table, and maybe also, does it all makes a difference in the eyes of the Russians? Are we actually strengthening our deterrence capability, not just talking about the capabilities that we develop?
What could be advised? To do what was promised. I already mentioned we were committed to spend 2%, but few countries did that, right? Now there are another benchmark, 3.5% for defense and 1.5% to the areas related to defense. And here jazz starts, where every country would like to be creative and try to cover by that expenses which not very much matching with military, which is not right, probably, approach. So that's important. Also, I'd like to say that maybe generals would agree that there are a lot of overlapping armament produced in European countries, but we have to fill gaps. And when it comes to the production, of course, speed of production is very important. So I would repeat, cutting red tape and bureaucracy, but also to make sure that we are using properly these resources. I would add, one more benchmark when we're talking about defense spending. It's not just threshold, 3.5, but also output efficiency. I like when our friend General Hodges said that in fighting, it's not so impressive what kind of percentage you have. Capabilities, matter. And that's important to note. So we are not doing enough in coordinating these things. It's also a problem. So that would be maybe in short reaction to your question.
Can I invite you, because I know you've been also dealing with Russian diplomacy, Russian pressure.
You call dealing with Russian diplomacy?
You've been on the receiving end of both Russian threats as Lithuania and also sometimes in the past Russians offer for dialogue, strategic stability. So what you can advise in terms of how do we approach the deterrence factor and
I got it.
changing the minds or affecting the minds of the Russian leadership?
2 points from my experience with Russian diplomacy. I'll try to be as short as possible. One has to do with defense plans. If you remember, there was a period where there was a big noise and no defense plans. And at that time, I was Perm Rep at NATO. My colleague was Dmitry Rogozin. Somebody knows this name. Very colorful person, more politician than diplomat. But we were talking with him, fighting during NATO-Russia Council and then talking informally. He told me not once, don't cheat on us. You think we will believe that you do not have NATO plans? They didn't believe. And then I tried to tell to some of my colleagues in NATO Council, guys, they do not believe. If you think it will be too provocative, because there were some voices, it will be too provocative. It was, by the way, too provocative to have exercises on Article 5, if you remember. It was until, well, some 15, 16 years ago. Too provocative, let's not do that. Now it's not the case, but at that time it was. So a bit surprising for us, for newcomers, but for others it was quite normal. So they didn't believe. It was one more point. If you remember missile defense, it was proposals from highest capitals and NATO officials to cooperate with Russia on missile defense. Theater missile defense and also territorial missile defense, which is actually Article 5. You cannot outsource for Article 5 Russians to conduct territorial, but it was done. And then Rogozin asked me, as probably representing nuclear power, I don't know, which is not the case, look, so you are going to share with us this button? And then I said, probably not, maybe exchange some data, which was actually envisaged. And then he said, so it's not serious. And if you remember, Medvedev at that time was temporary president, and he made statements. We will see how NATO is honest. Are they really mean what they say, that let's cooperate? He knew that we will not do that. And then it was correction. If you again remember that NATO will defend NATO, Russia will defend Russia, and we will be friends and we will cooperate. So we are sometimes naive, or are we pretending to be naive? I don't know. At least it's not professional. So this is also my experience from diplomacy with Russians. Let's not fool them. Let's not fool ourselves. And they are getting clear language, clear messages, and arguments on the ground. It's always the case. If you are playing games, if you're making statements, not impressing at all. Just real stuff, hard so to say, stuff can impress them and make them think about.
I think the time of the naivete with the relationship with Russia is over, and we are facing this new reality. General Schilling, I would like to come back to the issue of preparing Bundeswehr for the new reality. And sometimes we focus very much on the percentage of defense spending or particular capabilities or even particular weapon systems to develop. But as I understand, among your duties is also the issue of personal support. So could you maybe talk about maybe this slightly less glamorous or video attractive parts in which increase the readiness and then have an impact on the deterrence capabilities. Also the relationship between the armed forces and the broader society, which at the end would need to support the decision made at the political level and implemented by the military.
Yes, of course. Money is not the solution for our problems. It's the way we have to use to solve the problems. And it's not only capability in technical development, but we have to find the right people to fulfill the tasks. And this is also something we can learn from the current conflicts, that beside all automation and autonomy of systems, the number of soldiers and having the right ones is one of the most decisive points. And in my opinion, the challenges for all of our armed forces are enormous and may be very unique, because on the one hand, our weapon systems are becoming more sophisticated and sophisticated, and you really need experts to handle them, and you have to train those experts for years, like we do in professional armies. On the other hand, we now see new systems which are exactly of the same complexity than the traditional ones, but the usability of those systems, like the autonomous systems, is for the user much more easier, and you can you don't have to train them for years. And now we have to make those shift within our systems, and this is what I mentioned before when I talked about doctrine and training systems, because we have to adjust this as well. General Dymanovsky already stressed the importance of the reserve forces, and this is also something where we are very hardworking in Germany, because of course there is those close link between the society and the armed forces, and it is symbolized somehow through the reserve forces. And yes, we in Germany, we do not have, it might sound weird when I say this here in Poland, but we do not have this tradition of reserve forces, and our society is always very skeptic on bringing close links together between the armed forces and the society. And so I'm very interested in this program you invented here in Poland last autumn, because I think this is a good way to enhance the resilience of a society and to explain the necessities of being prepared and being ready also for normal people. Not everyone has to join the armed forces or has to join the reserve forces, but everyone has to know what to do in case of, and how to prepare the best for themselves and their loved ones. And as we see it now in Germany, there's also a transition on that. The solidarity with Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, and also with all countries which are east of us is really high. We see the threat. In Berlin, we somehow feel the threat, and people are more interested how they can engage. And now we have to do something out of that, and we have to bring them into the armed forces. At the moment, we do have 30,000 reservists, which is not 30,000 reservists are training every year. We do have 60,000 in the moment who are prepared and ready to get into the service. We have to enhance this number up to 200,000 within a few years. And we are, of course, allowed to go over these numbers, and we are working on that and trying that as well. I think this is a very decisive moment for the German armed forces and the society. But I'm very optimistic that we go the right way.
General Dymanovsky, of course, if you have any reactions to General Schilling's comments, feel free to do that in regards to Polish experience with reserve forces. But I would also invite you to talk maybe a little bit about the areas where we still depend on the United States. You mentioned the 7 pillars, the necessity to have the precision strike capabilities as sovereign as possible, but at the same time, it's one of the elements where we still rely on the Americans from the hardware to the ISR. So where the gaps, the most important gaps are, and what can we do to actually address them?
Thank you very much for the question. And in fact, as you mentioned, I have covered most of the topics in my previous answer, because exactly the 7 areas of development I describe are the answer for the capability gaps we have here in the Polish Armed Forces, but I also believe that across the many of our allies here in Europe. And whenever we assess the military needs, the military capabilities we have to develop, it is always good to start from the mission, from the tasks. So if you analyze you don't have to analyze, you just have to read the NATO strategic papers, and there are 3 core tasks defined for NATO: deterrence and defense, crisis prevention and management, and cooperative security. And I think that we all in this room can agree that by far the most important is deterrence and defense. So that's why we have to develop, we have to build up capabilities to be ready to fulfill this mission. And that is why I will just echo what I said previously. So deep precision strike and integrated air and missile defense. That is something that currently US brings on the table. And if it is all off the table because there is different focus for the American Armed Forces, that will be a challenge for us. So that's why this is something that we have to beyond the shadow of the doubt develop here in Europe. But apart from that, in order to create environment, to create ecosystem, to apply all those striking capabilities, regardless of whether defensive or offensive, you need ISR, so strategic enablers. ISR, again, so intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and many of those assets are provided by the US currently. You need strategic communication, and again, that is something that mainly is provided by the United States. And you need also, I mentioned that in my previous answer, electronic warfare assets, which are high demand and low availability assets across the alliance. So definitely those are the capabilities we have to develop. And plus also we are facing the same challenge as mentioned by General Schilling. So human resources, that is something we have to work on because of the trends in demography, because of the competitiveness in the work market. So there are some challenges for us as the armed forces we are facing at the moment. And those challenges are agnostic whether US is supporting us or not. We just have to develop the numbers, I mean, in terms of human resources here in Poland. But just one more remark. This is not only about building up military capabilities, but I think this is much broader than that, and we need a broader look on the deterrence and defense, and that includes the resilience of the nation, resilience of the society, and of course the production capacity and capabilities of our defense industry, including ammunition, and it also includes a proper infrastructure. Both IT and transportation. That's all.
Thank you very much. I hope you have your questions ready. We should have some mics. So I see a couple of hands starting in the second row. Anna, second row to my right.
Much. I'm Nadener, the head of International Security Program here in PISM. Thank you all panelists for a very interesting panel. But I have a question to both distinguished generals. How do you see possibilities of cooperation between Poland and Germany in the military field? Of course, we can think that there is a little bit competition, which army should be the bigger one in Europe. However, all of us know that definitely we are the core of Europe, and if we are thinking about deterrence and our common policy towards Russia, but Belarus as well, the cooperation is crucial. So how do you see the possibilities of that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I suggest we collect a couple of questions. So indeed, let's go to the gentleman in the middle.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hiro Akita from Tokyo, opinion writer of Nikkei. So my question is about the scenario of Russian attack on NATO. There is a several assessment by NATO countries, or maybe even Secretary General Rutte said last year, the end of last year, that there is a possibility that Russia will attack NATO countries within several years. But Russia cannot even, conquer Ukraine. It's in Ukraine itself. So I wonder if what kind of a scenario is likely if Russia really will attack NATO country within coming years. Thank you.
Just to follow up on this question, Chris Zalewski from Warsaw Boeing Institute. Do we have open communication channels with Russia on this operational level? Because we know that Americans do speak with Russians. We have some indications that the French would speak also quite regularly, have this kind of operational exchange with our Russian partners. And so should we speak independently as NATO countries with Russia with one voice, or shall we do it as we do it right now, one by one? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I suggest we go back to the panel, starting with General Schilling, John Demanowski, and ending with Ines.
Okay, thank you. I start with the fields of cooperation. I guess we couldn't cooperate too much with each other, and we are constantly identifying new and additional fields of cooperation. I'm absolutely happy that we will see some military engineers from Germany here in Poland, which will support the Eastern Shield initiative, and they will be here on Polish soil and working here to prepare the fortification and to work with that symbol on the freedom of the Polish people, which is very important for me as a German general to say here in Poland that I'm very proud of that initiative. And we have longer cooperations like we have in Stettin in the multinational core Northeast. We have a very successful cooperation with the CTF Baltic for a couple of years now, and we are looking forward to the move of the headquarters to Poland in 2028. We really, we work on those different fields and are trying to identify additional ones every time we meet, which is several times a year. And I don't see, maybe there is the challenge who has the biggest conventional armed forces in Europe. But I think I'm very happy about that challenge. And for Germany, it is important that we have an aim to reach out for, and that we have the political commitment to that aim. And I'm absolutely with you that it is necessary that our both nations in the center of Europe are very strong, and that we have strong armed forces. The question of the scenario, there is a common threat assessment, a joint threat assessment on the NATO level, and there are scenarios which are the basis of our defense planning. And I'm not able to explain you the reasons, but what we see is that Russia is not spending all their capabilities on the war in Ukraine. They are preparing for something additional. They have capabilities they don't use now, and we see that the way they equip and they posture their forces is a threat for NATO countries, and so we are preparing on scenarios which are accepted from all NATO countries, and so therefore every nation knows what its role is in those defense planning. Looking or talking about communication channels to Russia, this is to be honest, nothing to talk about in the public, which is I guess, clear when we look at those questions. So therefore, I can't answer the question. But what I can say is, and this is for every communication very important, that of course it should be the same way with the same messages, and we have to guarantee the coherence of the alliance, especially communicating when there is communication and takes place, whether on the level of the heads of governments or of a different one.
If I'm not mistaken, there is a line of communication between Sakar and the Russian chief of general staff. The question is whether the Russians are picking up the phone or the device that we are using. So in terms of mill-to-mill emergency communication, I guess on the NATO side, there is a possibility to engage the Russians if needed during incidents or accidents. General Demanowski?
Thank you very much. Very briefly, question number one about the cooperation between Poland and Germany. Most of the topics have been already covered by Dr. Schilling, so I will just would like to draw your attention that, to put you in the picture, from my perspective, the military cooperation from Poland can be done along two axes. Vertical, which is the Nordic states, Baltic states, Romania and Turkey, and horizontal, which is the depth and the many logistic depths and reinforcement by forces and fires. And this depth for Poland is provided by Germany. So this is a starting point, a cornerstone from our cooperation. So that's why it's so important to work together. Plus, of course, Germany have the troops in Lithuania, so that's why they are also enhancing deterrence and defense posture along the eastern flank of NATO. So I think that what we can do, what we can also develop, it's still continuing to align our defense plans, both between Poland and Germany and between NATO. That's number one. Number two, of course, common training and exercises. We have been doing a lot, but there is always room for improvement. Common armaments programs and research and development programs, that might be something which is not particularly military area of expertise, but might be done between our industries or research and development entities. I think that very important element is strategic communication. It's always good, but it is aligned and it is very cohesive and united, especially when it is sent, when we are sending signals towards Russia. So, plus, of course, there are issues that have been already done and for which we are very grateful for, like deployment of the troops here in Poland to show our unity. So we had the German air policing team here in Malbork. I don't know why in Malbork. Joke. And of course, ground-based air defense forces. So that's very important signal, not only to Russia, but also to our societies that we are working together. And I think a good example of the cooperation we have had with Germany recently is the fact that now we will, together with Germany, have a rotational position of the commander of the Joint Force Brunsum, one of the most important commands in the NATO command structure. So it will be either Polish or German four-star general holding this post in a 3-year rotational tour. So that's very important. Scenarios. So there are plenty of scenarios we're taking into considerations. As General Schilling said, we have a common threat assessment in NATO. So we know, we have analysis, what are the most likely, most probable threats and how to respond to them. But of course, the portfolio of Russia is getting bigger and bigger, wider and wider. So that's why we also are expanding the portfolio of our potential responses. And just observing the situation in Ukraine, you can add some additional scenarios which you have to take into account, which are feasible for Russia, even without stopping the war against Ukraine. And I will stop here. And finally, about the communication, yes, it is very important, but from my perspective, it should be done as an alliance communication. So it should be always one signal, very cohesive signal, very united signal, because Russia will always use any cracks and any division between allies, and it will exploit them to achieve their strategic objectives. That's all.
Thank you. Ambassador, over to you.
Not much time, just a few words on also strategic communications and on these scenarios when Russia will attack. I don't like them at all. I would not endorse that. I'm sometimes surprised. These experts, in 2 years Russia will attack, in 3 years Russia will attack. I don't know whom it helps. Russia having fun about that on their own TV. No need to add anything, just to show how we are divisive, how we are weak, how we're lacking everything, expertise, whatever. I never heard from Ukrainians like that. Never complaining about lack of manpower, ammunition, which was problematic, or cutting military support by United States, for instance, or Europeans doing too slowly. Never, never, ever. And today, Minister Sibiga told that time is approaching. He told something like that. The time is approaching when time will be on their side. It's an optimistic statement, but if it's partly true, it's also okay. So let's focus on our tasks to unlock our potential, because we are strong Europeans, but we are lazy sometimes. We are bureaucratic. We are taking time for us to... Ukrainians, by the way, saving time. Ukrainians fighting and saving to us time to make us better. So that's the reason why we can do it more so to say slowly. But I believe otherwise, let's make our strategic communication offensive rather than defensive.
Thank you very much. I don't know how about you, but I'm very encouraged by our panel. We are not admiring the problem or listing the challenges, but actually talking about our actions and translating strategy into specific capabilities and specific deterrence potential. So please join me in thanking Generals Schilling and Dymanowski and Ambassador Linkevičius for excellent discussions.
Thank you to all the panelists. And Łukasz, you know the drill. I would like to invite you up to talk about the main takeaways from your panel.
Łukasz, what did this panel add to the previous session about strategically lonely Europe? Did it make the challenges that we are facing look somehow more manageable?
I think in the previous session, we established that the change is happening, that the change is real, not connected to particular individuals like President Trump. So there'll be less US in European security. And even if we don't talk about divorce, we would be talking about different ways of coexisting. And in this session, I think we establish how we adjust to this new reality. The bigger players, let me put it like this, Poland and Germany, where the militaries are planning and implementing the new set of plans, of capabilities, and also Lithuania with its particular location, with its particular impact and experience. So I think in a sense, it wasn't about saying that we have a problem, but indeed about saying what we are doing about it.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Łukasz, for your insight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I'd like to thank you all for this very fruitful day, both people on the spot and those watching us via our stream. I think we've all been given some food for thought, but please leave some room for tomorrow, as we will see you then at 11 sharp. We'll start with a keynote speech from Minister of Energy of Poland, Miłosz Motyka. And in the meantime, have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.